There it goes.
Oh, you turn it.
All right, here we go. We'll do it again. I'd like to call to order, please, the regular meeting on Monday, October 26th at 6 p.m. Would you please join Councilmember Campbell in the Pledge of Allegiance and stay standing for the invocation?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Father, as we gather here this evening, we ask your special blessing upon this council as we deliberate the business of the city. We thank you, Father, for the many, many blessings that we enjoy every single day, least of which, or most of which, is our ability to meet in a public forum. We ask a special blessing, Lord, on those providers who guard us day and night, and extra hedge of protection for our troops here and abroad. We thank you, Lord, for everything. Amen.
Thank you, Councilman Campbell. All right, as we look on the dais, we are missing someone tonight, so Councilman Holman will not be attending tonight's meeting. So could I have a motion, a second, please, to excuse her?
So moved. Second.
I heard a motion from Councilman Campbell and a second from Councilman Osborne. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. We have no communication this evening. So now is the time for a citizen who would like to address the city on any non-agenda item. Do we have anybody here in the audience? We have anybody? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Then we'll go on. Will the city clerk please read consent agenda items 6.1 through 6.5 by title only, please?
Item 6.1, approve draft minutes of a regular meeting held on September 28, 2015, and a regular meeting held on October 5, 2015. Item 6.2, accept the Urban Area Security Initiative Chemical, Biological, Radiological, Nuclear Explosive Response Team Sustainment Enhancement Grant of $50,000 awarded by the Arizona Department of Homeland Security to the Goodyear Police Department, and authorize the city manager or designee to execute any and all documents necessary for the award and administration of the grant. Item 6.3, accept the Urban Area Security Initiative Chemical, Biological, Radiological, Nuclear Explosive Response Team Sustainment Enhancement Grant of $50,000 awarded by the Arizona Department of Homeland Security to the Goodyear Fire Department, and authorize the city manager or designee to execute any and all documents necessary for the award and administration of the grant. Item 6.4, approve the acceptance of a quitclaim deed for a portion of Bullard Avenue just north of Cambridge Avenue. Item 6.5, adopt resolution number 15-1728, authorizing the establishment of public utility easements adjacent to portions of 143rd Avenue and 145th Avenue to be administered and maintained by the city, requiring recordation and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Does anybody from the public wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? Does anyone from the council wish to remove an item? Councilman Stiff?
Mayor, I'd like to remove 6.4.
6.4. Is it something we can answer, or you want to just totally remove it right now?
No, I'd like a
Okay, so
discussion about.
then what I need is, let's go ahead and do the motions then on 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, and 6.5. Do I hear a motion in a second?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a motion by Vice Mayor Loretano and a second by, was that you, Councilman Stiff? So roll call vote on that part, please.
Vice Mayor Loretano.
Aye.
Councilmember Osborne.
Aye.
Councilmember Pizzillo.
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell.
Aye.
Councilmember Stipp.
Aye.
Mayor Lord.
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
All right, so let's go to 6.4. So this is on acceptance of a quick claim deed for the portion of the Bullard Avenue recommended. So would you like a presentation on this?
Well, Mayor, thank you. It seems fairly obvious what we're trying to do. I'm just trying to figure out how we got here.
Mayor and council, looking back on the situation, I've been looking, this situation's been out there for a number of years. It appears that there was a gap between what was, I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain this, but what happened was we had a plat that was recorded, and the plat showed a street that existed that was already recorded. However, there was a gap between those. The bus bay was not part of the right-of-way dedication, and the plat only went up to where the right-of-way dedication should have been. But it was an error on the city's part, I would assume, and on the part of the folks that did the original platting, and not catching the fact that the two did not meet. And it got caught at the county assessor, but it took a few years for the city to catch up with it, and the city's worked to try to resolve it since then, but we hadn't had good support from Globe in the past. We'd contacted them, asked them to dedicate it, and it wasn't until recently that they were willing to do so.
So, but their willingness to do so was based on our paying the $5,000 in back taxes.
They are also willing to not do so and leave it just stay.
So what happens if that?
It will go to sheriff's sale, and it'll end up in foreclosure. So they're willing to not do it also. They don't really, in their mind at this point, it doesn't matter whether it occurs one way or the other.
What difference to us does it make?
What happens to us? Then we have a third-party owner of a sliver of land where our sidewalk and light pole and whatnot are, and they have no obligation to dedicate it to us, so it'll stay out there until such point as we want to resolve it, or it'll just stand.
So why don't they have reason to? Isn't that part of the original development agreement that they had to? Lay that out. I mean, there's some reason we got the land for free up front, theoretically, at some point in time.
Right.
And it was just not platted correctly.
I mean, I think that we could possibly, and it's something I'd have to go through legal, but the problem is that in order to go back on them and try to recoup it, if we could prove it, if the statute of limitations hadn't passed, I'm not sure. Again, you have that problem. We have a timing issue at this point, and we also have an issue with regard to if you go back in and you have to fight it, would that be worth the cost that the city would incur trying to fight it?
Okay,
So you're saying pick your fight.
Right. So where's the $5,000 coming from?
It's coming from engineering's. We have a budget for ancillary items, and we're pulling it out of that budget.
Is that the CIP contingency?
Remember if we know what that.
Because that'll come up later tonight.
No, we had a budget-related, Councilmember and Mayor, we had a budget item of $10,000 related to real estate items and miscellaneous, but it all relates to items that fall under real estate that Linda deals with. So it was an appropriate location to take the money from.
So it's already in the operating budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for entertaining my questions.
Is that it, Bill? All right, so I guess I need a motion and a second on this one, too. So do I hear it?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
I heard a motion from Vice Mayor Loretano and a second from
Pizzillo. Beat me.
Councilman Pizzillo. Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Osborne?
Aye.
Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Stipp?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Loretano?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
All right, let's go on. We're going to start the public meeting, so I'm going to open the public meeting, and just a second. I think I'm on the right page, yeah. Would the city clerk please read the resolution 15-1718 by title only, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Must have moved my sheet, just a second. Oh, sorry. Let's start that all over again. All right, the public meeting is open. You're on. And it's to consider adopting a 5-year water and wastewater rate structure.
Thank you, Mayor and council
Sure.
members. pleased to be here tonight to go over our long process that we've completed to recommend to you a 5-year water and wastewater rate structure recommendation. The agenda for tonight consists of the following points. I want to talk a little bit about the purpose and background, the analysis and key findings that drove the capital rate requirement as far as the infrastructure improvements, the Water Planning Committee recommendations. That was a significant portion of the overall process that we'll go into a little bit more detail, but on a high-level basis. The proposed rate plans, economist.com, Dan Jackson will be here to give an idea of what the rate structure eventually that we are recommending to you tonight is the highlights of that also. The customer impacts and the benefits. What will the customer see as improvements as a result of this investment that will be made? The public process, that was a major consideration of council, and we tried to use many forms of communication in addition with the Water Planning Committee to get the word out and to show the various things that were considered through the process. And then the next steps, what follows. We'll begin with the purpose. Protection of the Goodyear's water supply was paramount in this effort. What we did in the analysis is look at what the current operational issues that we were experiencing are, and also as it relates to the wastewater system and the water system. The supply is the first element. The second is the wastewater and water systems that collect and distribute the water. And then to develop a plan to provide a high level of service to all of our customers. And what does that mean? You'll hear a little bit more detail about that. But generally speaking, it's after looking at the initial findings, there were concerns of reliability, system reliability. And what that entails is having a system that provides good storage, good pump capacity, and the distribution system to prevent outages, breakage, main breaks, or water shutoffs, or pump failures. Also, the plan looked at many alternatives and really identified what are the essential things that need to happen to really make our system reliable and to do it at the lowest possible cost. The utility rate study that we completed was one that we typically complete every 5 years. It really looked at best practices, the common standards amongst various municipalities that provide the similar services as we do. We also have as a backdrop the need for water, the availability of water. You're all aware that this is becoming a key issue in the Southwest. And I'd like to say that the elements of this increase has a small portion of looking ahead in terms of our cap water supply, which we'll touch on later. But it's really the first step to get our system up to a point where with the additional growth, we're able to expand the system to address the future capacity. It doesn't have the capacity built into this unit, these 5 years, but it's the first step in getting our system in good operational ability. The enterprise funds that are used for both the wastewater system and the water system, they're solely financed from fees and rates that are charged by this to our customers. It's a customer-driven enterprise. No general funds or tax revenue are commingled or used in the operation of this fund or the capital requirements to finance debt. The revenues must be sufficient to provide all the maintenance of the debt service, capital requirements, and also the cash reserves that are required. And finally, the utilities, the city utility is designed to operate on a break-even rate basis over time. What that means is we don't accumulate a major cash amount. It usually covers the cost of each operation, including the annual cost and debt. As I mentioned earlier, the Water Planning Committee was a significant element that we strategically placed after we had an engineering consultant do an integrated water master plan, or really begin his efforts. So the committee that consisted of 9 members and 2 alternates, 3 of which I'm going to introduce here shortly, but they attended a series of meetings. We had over 9 meetings, 2 hours each. And preceding that, they did a plant tour of both, probably an afternoon, inspecting all of our facilities, the major facilities throughout our system, both the water and wastewater side. Their charge, their purpose was to really review all of the information of our current system, look at what the recommendations were, and then weigh in on whether or not they supported those recommendations of staff. And through that process, you'll see that there were changes that were made in our recommendation to reflect some of the concerns that the committee members had. The members that participated served a number of different factions within our community, various neighborhoods. We had a business representative. We had a state senator on the committee, and all of which made for great discussions and great involvement on their part. The members that are here today is first the chairman, Mario Colombo, if I could ask him to stand. Mario. Secondly, the vice chair was Jason Batten. And another member that was able to be here is Peter Minerick. Thank you. All of the meetings, I should point out, were available. They were publicly noticed. They were recorded. They were put on the city's website. And along with all of the data and the technical information that the members spent many hours going through and asking questions. Carrillo Engineers was the engineer that is performing the integrated water master plan, and it's integrated in the sense that it's looking at all of the city's water systems, the supply, the wastewater system, the reclaimed water systems, the sewage treatment facilities, wastewater collection facilities, and really looking at it as a comprehensive set of infrastructure and coming up with recommendations that consider all of those elements. So as we recommend improvements that in the water side or the wastewater side, it also has to reflect what the reclaimed water and how we are going to be using or recharging water. So in that sense, it's an integrated analysis. The assessment was completed immediately for a 5-year program. We asked them to accelerate that portion of that work so we could give those recommendations to the Wastewater Planning Committee. And then also it recommended a couple things. An asset management type of system was important to begin for the city to begin utilizing, as well as a condition analysis of all of the critical infrastructure that we have in our city. And finally, in 2014 and 15, economistdocs.com was tasked with analyzing the best rate plan necessary to meet the infrastructure needs. And you'll hear a little bit more from Dan Jackson shortly. So with that, let me see. I'd like to introduce either Guy Carpenter or Richard. Guy Carpenter is here, so he's from Carrillo Engineers.
Thanks, Bob. Honorable Mayor and Council, my name is Guy Carpenter. I'm a Vice President with Carrillo Engineers, and I'm the Principal in charge of your Integrated Water Resources Master Plan update. Do I click through here? There we go. So the way that we do a master plan is we're looking at your systems here, and we're looking at how they perform relative to performance criteria that are based on what we find in state statute, engineering best practices, and customer level of service expectations. And we arrive at the engineering recommendations based upon the fact that you have a 100% groundwater supplied system, and by considering how each of these criteria, the criteria for these areas, transmission, supply, pumping, pressure, storage, fire flow, and water quality all come together to provide the reliable service that your customers depend upon, and making sure that we meet the Safe Drinking Water Act standards. A technical memorandum was completed in May that provides justification for the recommended performance criteria and the costs that I'm going to present. We also compared how your performance criteria line up to other Valley cities, as well as evaluate why they're slightly different. I'm going to show you a list of projects that need to be completed in the next 5 years just to get the city in good shape for meeting the needs of the existing service area. This first list is for water supply projects, and it's provided for emphasis because the biggest concern right now is regarding having sufficient water supply. The justification for the first 4 projects is that they're needed for redundancy, according to the application of the performance criteria that we establish for the city. Without them, you are at risk of not having enough water supply for the average day and or for the peak day demands, depending on the scenario that we looked at. The well siting study that's in this list is not actually a construction project, but is a prerequisite for determining where wells can be drilled in terms of not impacting somebody else's well and not causing drawdown that is outside of allowable limits. The last 5 projects on this list were recommended because the wells are old and their components need to be repaired or replaced. Well number 1 is not worth rehabilitating and needs to be completely replaced. On this next page, the first part of this, the first group is exactly what I just showed you on the previous slide. Again, these are your water supply projects, and they are absolutely priority number 1. The second grouping is for increasing pumping capacity. That is, now that you've got the water from the wells, you have to have the ability to pump the water throughout your system to your customers. Site number 12 is at Cotton Lane in Lower Buckeye, and site number 13 is at Estrella Mountain Ranch. The improvements at site 12 will make use of the water supply provided by the 2 new wells that were recommended above. These next 3 groupings, the first one is water storage projects. And under water storage projects, we don't know yet where the 1.5 million gallon per day storage facility will be, but it'll probably be somewhere near site 12. We'll figure that out as we continue to do the hydraulic modeling in the last phases of this project. Again, site number 13 is at Estrella Mountain Ranch, and it's just showing signs of aging and wear that needs to be repaired and replaced. The next grouping is the wastewater projects. They are all recommended based upon condition assessments. That is where we went out and looked at the actual facilities and determined that improvements were necessary to prevent near-term failure. The collection system improvements are necessary because of the impacts of corrosion on concrete and steel. This is a normal problem to have as a system ages. The final grouping is kind of a catch-all of miscellaneous projects that all make sense to be included in the capital budget. The CAP subcontract capital charges, these are charges that you have to pay the Central Arizona project for basically the water that you have as a subcontractor. Whether you use the water through a treatment plant or through a recharge project or not, you've got to pay those capital charges. Those charges were already included in your existing CIP. We just carried that forward. The equipment at the Bullard campus water treatment facility is corroding and exhibits normal wear and tear that needs to be rehabilitated. You do have a small development in the city that was constructed, unfortunately, with some substandard materials, and the water main replacements that are listed there are specific to that area. The city has been proactive as it can be under the economic conditions that we all face. However, the distribution management, operations, and maintenance program is being recommended, and it really is a professional services project more than a capital project. more than a construction project, and it'll provide the city with a more proactive approach to maintaining your water infrastructure. It's really a best practices program. So now this is the shock slide with all of the numbers on it. What we've done here is these are the categories that I've already presented with the costs rolled up for each category except where specified. For example, the well projects are all rolled up into that first line item, and those are the ones that I showed on that first slide. That totals $27.9 million, whereas the Bullard Campus Water Treatment Facility project is specifically called out, and that's for $140,000. In summary, the estimated cost for water system improvements is approximately $39 million, and the cost for wastewater is $12.5 million. These projects, their justifications based upon good engineering practices and performance criteria, as well as their costs, were presented and recommended to the Water Planning Committee, which is discussed next by Mr. Beckley.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Water Planning Committee reviewed the 5-year projects, just summarized by Guy, and they believed and they understood the importance of all of those issues. So they recommended proceeding with the funding of those projects in the CIP and incorporated in the rate structures. There was considerable discussion on the CAP, the Central Arizona Project water rate and inclusion as a separate line item on the customer bills. And it was really felt that that's kind of a unique charge to us, and it was important for our customers to understand that element of the cost that makes up our rate structure. There was also discussion in that time as far as ensuring that we're recharging the same amount of the volume of water that we're utilizing citywide. So the number that the committee felt that was appropriate to move forward in this rate structure was that volume. There's a potential for the city to recharge more, but that would have cost significantly more dollars. So that was one of the issues that was considered and recommended. The recommendation of the multifamily and commercial rate structures and cost of service. You may recall at the time we last came before you, there was some discussion on the committee level, and we were, Mr. Lang, the finance director, met with the representatives from the multifamily apartment complex group. And after they looked at the rates, they felt like the rates were, at this point in time, equitable, and didn't feel that there was a need to change them at this point in time, but we'll continue to look at and monitor those rates over the next few years. Line oversizing and the impact fee reimbursement. For new developments that occur in the city, when the developers come in and pay for their lines, the incremental increase that's necessary to support the city at large needs is what we refer to as line oversizing. So that element of cost that is not initially funded by the abutting property owners is a cost that has been added to the rate analysis. As far as impact fee reimbursements, there is to reimburse the improvements that are made by the developers. That impact fee is coming out of the rate structure also. In terms of the wastewater rates, the initial cost was kind of a front-end loaded. So after we looked at what the cost increase per year was, the recommendation from the Water Planning Committee is to look at phasing them in. So we lowered the first year or two and then levelized those rate increases to some extent over the course of the 5-year rate increase. The non-rate fees and charges, those are the fees and charges that were evaluated on the basis of what the current market conditions were as other compared with other communities and what our cost of providing those fees were. And those were reflected with slight modifications there. And then finally, the One of the last major recommendations of the Water Planning Committee was to look at the water conservation needs. They wanted another committee to really delve into that. And as I think we've communicated with you previously, we'll be coming to you within I think the next month to begin the Water Conservation Committee to ask to enact that new committee that would start early in 2016. Just to highlight CAP and provide this is the cost per acre foot for the CAP charges. Out of comparison, we listed Salt River Project, water commodity costs, and that's one of the areas when you look at comparing different utilities, you have basic conditions going in, and this is one of the basic conditions that we, because we're on the west side, are supplied with CAP for our surface water deliveries, and we recharge that. In the East Valley, SRP is a much lower commodity per acre foot. And that's one of the factors that, as some people look at how your rate expense is derived, that's a significant element. At this point, I'd like to bring Dan Jackson up from economist.com to give you a summary of what the rate analysis looks like.
Thank you very much, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Dan Jackson. I'm managing director of economist.com, and we have had the privilege of assisting the city over the past year in developing a long-term rate plan that will enable the city to meet all of its objectives with regards to the water and wastewater utility in a manner that, to the best extent possible, minimizes the impact of any inevitable water and wastewater rate increases on the ratepayers. In my portion of my presentation tonight, I'm going to outline the city's overall cost of service, which is derived by the factors that have already been discussed tonight, and then I'm going to present the rate plan that was settled upon or decided upon through both the committee and the staff and through your prior input into the process. What we're going to present is a 5-year rate plan for the water utility and the wastewater utility. So we're going to show water proposed rate changes, and we're going to show proposed changes to the wastewater utility. Now, what's important to point out in this presentation is that this presentation does not impact the city's sanitation rates at all. And I say that because when the city bills for its services each month, it sends out a bill that combines water rates, wastewater charges, and sanitation charges. And we point that out because we're going to be talking about some percentages tonight. And it is important to understand that the percentages that we're going to be talking about are only going to pertain to the water and the wastewater proportion. Sanitation is 25 to 30% of a ratepayer's average bill, and none of that is factored into this. So if we talk about a 9% increase in water rates, that does not mean somebody's entire bill goes up by 9%. It means only the water portion of it goes up by that percentage. It's very easy to get for that percentages to be misleading in that manner. Okay, the presenters earlier tonight, I think, did a very effective job in outlining why costs are going up. Because one of the key questions that's always asked in terms of any water and wastewater rate plan is, why should I have to pay more? Why are our water rates going up? Well, they're going up for a variety of reasons. Probably the most important reason is the need for a 5-year capital improvement plan. It costs a lot of money to build and maintain a water and wastewater system, to build those lines and to drill those wells and to expand those wastewater treatment plants. Like any asset, those wear out after a period of time. And as was pointed out earlier, you're looking at as much as $50 million of capital improvements in your water and wastewater system over the next 5 years. That money has to come from somewhere, and if it is not invested in your system, it is going to result in the deterioration of the quality of your service. So the capital improvement needs are a critical component behind this rate plan. Another critical component is your existing budget expenses. Your budget goes up over time. every budget goes up over time. After all, cost of everything goes up by 3 to 4% a year. So in the future, your budget is probably going to be higher than it is today. The water and wastewater plan that is outlined here tonight takes that into consideration. Another key component is the supplementals to your budget, or the additional funding that is necessary to maintain the quality of service that you have right now. Another key component is your cap water costs. This impacts only your water costs, but it is a critical component of the long-term rate plan. The acquisition of water resources through cap is a principal driver behind the long-term rate plan that's being presented to you tonight. And a final component is the line oversizing and the impact fee reimbursements that is necessary for your system. Line oversizing is very important because it shows that you are investing in the future of your community, and you're doing so in the most cost-effective way possible. Okay, this chart right here is a summary of the 5-year projected cost of service for your water utility. It starts out here in the current fiscal year, 2016, and then it projects your costs for each of the next 4 years after that. Now, I know there's a lot of numbers on this page, but I think I can summarize it pretty quickly. Your existing budget expenses are expected to increase from about $13.8 million to about $16.8 million within the next 5 years. A lot of that is due to the fact that costs inevitably go up. When things like healthcare costs or insurance or workers' compensation, when all those costs go up, it's reflected in future budget cost increases. Your cap water allocations, as you can see, are projected to increase from $1 million in 2016 to $2.7 million by 2020. Another important, your budget supplementals are zero in the current year, but they're expected to be $500,000 to $600,000 each year after that. Now, look at this line item here. This is your debt service for your unfunded CIP. In other words, the $50 million that you're going to spend in investing in the future of your system, you have to borrow money in order to spend that. And when you borrow the money, you've got to pay back the principal and interest. So as you can see, you're going to acquire as much as $2 million a year in principal and interest payments within the next 5 years. And your rate plan takes into that into consideration as well. And finally, your unfunded impact fees and oversizing is about another $1 million a year. The bottom line is that your cost of service for your water utility is expected to go from $14.8 million to $23.2 million. Now, one final thing I want to point out about this chart is that the original drafts and the early in the process, as we went through this process, the original draft budgets were even higher than what you're looking at right now. That is really the benefit that you had by establishing your water committee and having your city staff go over the numbers time and time again. Because while we all know that costs are going up, you still, through proper management, can minimize those cost increases through proper managerial decisions. And this is what was done here. If this had not been done, the rate increases that we're talking about would be higher than what we're going to project for you tonight. This is the same chart on the wastewater side. Tells pretty much the same story. As you can see, your existing budget expenses are expected to go from $12 million to about $14 million over the next 5 years. Your budget supplementals, your unfunded CIP, and your impact fee oversizing is going to add to that as well. The bottom line being that your cost of service is expected to increase from $12 million in the current year to $16.5 million by 2020. So, with that in mind, I'm going to present to you the recommended 5-year water rate plan for your residential customers. Your residential customers right now pay for water service through a combination of minimum charges and charges for every 1,000 gallons of water that they purchase. Your average residential ratepayer right now pays a minimum charge of $11.24. They also pay a volume charge based on the amount of water they use. If they use between 0 and 6,000 gallons, they pay $1.30. If they use between 6 and 12,000 gallons, that rate goes up to $2.59 per 1,000 gallons. It goes up to $3.89 for between 12 and 30,000 gallons, and it goes to $6.25 for everything above 30,000 gallons. This is what's known as a conservation rate. The idea is that the more you use, the more you pay. It provides you a financial incentive to minimize water usage. Another important factor is that the ratepayers who use the least amount of water, and those typically, though not always, typically are your lowest income and your fixed income people, pay the lowest rates under this system. Now, as you can see, we're recommending that effective in January of each of the next 5 years, those rates go up. As you can see, the base charge goes up and the volumetric rate goes up as well. We're also recommending establishing a cap water charge that starts at 40 cents per 1,000 gallons and goes up to 95 cents per 1,000 gallons by 2020. Once again, this results in increased monthly water fees for everybody, but the lowest increases are on your lowest income and your fixed income ratepayers. This is your proposed water rate plan for your non-residential customers. Your non-residential and school customers, typically your businesses, right now, they also pay an inverted block rate that starts out at $3.30 per 1,000 gallons and eventually gets up to $6.86. The proportionate increases are the same for your non-residential customers over each of the next 5 years, and the same thing is true for your irrigation customers. The next chart right here shows your proposed wastewater rate plan, which is the same for all of your customers. Your wastewater ratepayers right now pay a minimum charge of $21.12 if they have a 3/4 inch water meter. If they have larger meters, they pay proportionately larger monthly charges. They pay a volumetric charge of $5.78 for every 1,000 gallons that they use based on a winter average. As you can see right here, under this plan, the monthly charge goes up nominally each year, and the volumetric charge goes up nominally each year as well. Now, I've shown you an awful lot of numbers here. The key question most people ask is, what does this mean in terms of a monthly bill? How much more is my monthly bill going to be under this plan? Well, that is answered in this chart right here. This is your average residential customer. Your average residential customer here in the city of Goodyear uses about 7,000 gallons of water service a month, and they use 5,000 gallons of wastewater service. Now, average is just that. It means some people use more, some people use less. But if you're an average ratepayer right now, you pay a water charge of $21.63 and a wastewater charge of $50.02 for a total amount of $71.65. Under this proposed rate plan, effective in January of 2016, your water charge would go to $27.25 and your wastewater charge would go to $51.50. That's a total of $78.75, or an increase of about $7.10. So your average ratepayer would see about a $7.10 increase under this plan. In 2017, that bill would go up by about $6.89 a month. In January of 2018, that bill would go up by about $5.23 a month, and then it would go up between $3 and $4 a month each year after that. Now, I estimate that about 50 to 70% of your residential ratepayers will see bills go up $7 or less a month under this rate plan in 2016. And the same thing is true for future years as well. Now, if you are a commercial user, typically your commercial ratepayers use a lot more water than residential ratepayers do. In fact, your average commercial user uses about 50,000 gallons a month, and they use about 40,000 gallons of wastewater service a month. So under this plan, your water charge would go from $225 a month for 50,000 gallons to $247 a month, and your wastewater charge would go up from $308 to $317. It'd be an increase from $534 to $592, or about $58.52 a month. That comes out to about 11%. The increase would be about the same in the next year, $58.35. It would be about $43.91 a month in January of 2018, and then a little less each month each year after that. Now, I really want to emphasize the following, because rate plans are very complicated. And there is very much the temptation to try to summarize this very complicated rate plan into one or two numbers. Well, it's hard to do that, but let's try. Your average residential ratepayer would see their bill go up by about $7.10 a month under this rate plan in 2016. That comes out to about a 9.9% increase on the water and sewer portion of their rate of their bill. The sanitation portion would not increase at all under this rate plan. Each year after 2016, the percentage increase would go proportionally downwards, 8.7% down to about 4%. If you're a commercial ratepayer, the percentage increase would be about 11% in 2016. Your average commercial ratepayer who uses 50,000 gallons a month would see their bill go up by about $63.52 under this plan. I now want to turn this back over to Mr. Beckley, who's going to go over the non-rate fees and charges portion of the presentation. I'm sorry, it's going to be Mr. Lang.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, and good evening. As part of our rate structures and part of what we ask the consultant to look at is our non-rate fees and charges. These are charges for specific services that only apply to specific customers and shouldn't be spread amongst all of the customers. And so we asked them to look at that and what the cost of those services were. And many of these services remained the same. Some of them increased because the cost increased. One good example I'll give you on that is the non-sufficient funds fee. If someone pays us with a non-sufficient fund check, the bank charges us $50 today. And so to charge them $35, we're losing the $15 on it. Each of these were looked at in that manner. When this was presented with the committee presentation in June to you, one of the discussions that you brought up was, what about that the security deposit for non-residential? Because the comment was made, what about the flower shop that doesn't use much water? Do they need a $650 deposit? Staff researched that. We also researched our collection history and what the various impacts of that were. And what we're going to recommend is that for those meters that are 2 inches or less, this is commercial, that the deposit would be $250. For those meters that are larger than that are 3 inches or larger, they're your greater water users, that would go up to the $650. For all of our customers, by the way, as it relates to the security deposits, if they can show good payment history to their utilities, we do not charge them the fee. This is only for those that aren't able to show that. And with that, I think I'll turn it back to Bob.
Thank you, Larry.
What's in it for the customer? That's the purpose of this slide. This rate increase is not for staff. It's really for the system that we're entrusted to deliver services to and to keep it in good operation. And the protection of the water supply is paramount to our water service personnel, wastewater personnel. And when we have provided the explanation of the status of our system, and I'll give you a quick example. We had previously Mark Siemens, who was environmental services manager. I asked him to put on a presentation. It's a fairly lengthy presentation, but the essence of it is this. A year ago, we had a part failure on one of the water wells that we have in our system. The well systems that we have, you may think we're a new city. This pump really was 30 years old, 20 to 30 years old. And the part that failed was one that was a used part when it was put in. So we were limping along with this, and it's unfortunate because the well the situation that happened was the well went down, and that it is a blending situation where we need a second well to blend with that well. So it really had a significant impact on the system. We had storage probably for an 18-hour period. We were fortunate to be able to rush the part in to replace it so the well wouldn't be down more than the 24-hour period. And it really highlighted to us the vulnerability of our system and what we need to do to really ensure that that situation doesn't really put us out of water for an extended period of time. That was kind of a one point in time that really illustrated the factors that were being brought out in this analysis. The water supply also is a significant part of this. As you've seen, there's a number of new wells and rehabilitated wells that are needed to just provide the redundancy necessary to ensure that we don't have outages. And then the water quality standards and regulations are essential to conform with. This is probably one of the more exciting parts of this whole process that we went through. The Water Planning Committee, as I mentioned earlier, was just fantastic. They had great ideas, a lot of thought went into and study went into on their part. But the communications was really what we strive for is asking them to put themselves in, which they were, in a ratepayer position and really think of it how it affects them and how it will affect most of the other ratepayers throughout the system. Their comments involve both the rates, the comments that they solicited from some of their neighbors, and they brought those forth to the meeting. It also gave us a place to put those meetings out on the public media, both on our website and access to all information that we sent out. We tried to direct customers or people that are interested back to our website to see as much of this information as possible. In Focus was a tremendous tool. We had some great articles on the water system and the issues that we were facing. We continue to make press releases and throughout the process, and we had e-notify. We tried to utilize what the email subscribers that we had to the city and send periodic notice and alerts out throughout the 8-month process. Social media was very active on that. We were our communications department used that extensively through that. We had a paid advertisement that we put in the newspaper, along with direct mail, and we utilized the utility bill message to the extent that we had available. Our customers and residents were asked to leave their comments, good or bad, and we had over 72 comments that were emailed into the finance department collected this. The common themes that came out was somewhere just information only, just inquired what the rate study was all about and background. A number of people were just against the rate increase, generally speaking, for various reasons. The concerns over water quality that were raised, that they were significant of importance to a number of residents and customers. The misunderstanding of the sanitation increases. They viewed the increase, they saw their sanitation rate increasing, where you saw in Dan Jackson's presentation that has remained the same. There's been no increase for this next year in sanitation. And then the suggestion was, why don't you use alternative funding sources, which, as we've talked about, it's the enterprise fund is really solely based on the revenue from the ratepayers. The couple comments that I'd like to make relative to, if you look at our rates, honestly, you look at, we're probably, if you look at the East Valley or West Valley, you see our rates are a little higher. And, we, over the last few weeks, we've been looking at this and trying to explain why. And if you look at the rate, it's the wastewater rate. The water rate is probably in the ballpark, but if you look at the sewer rate, it's higher. A couple of points that I wanted to bring up to explain a portion of that. The first is we produce A+ effluent. And the reason we do that is because we have a reclaimed water system. We have some customers on it. But if you're going to recharge your water, you have to treat it to the standpoint of A+ effluent to to be able to recharge it back to the ground. So that increases the treatment costs, where some agencies may not be treating it to that level of quality. We also treat brine for brine removal from our water system. A number of our wells have high solids, and we have to go through a reverse osmosis treatment process. And that process generates a significant amount of brine, which is hard to dispose of. So what we use on the method of disposal we use is we pump that back to the wastewater treatment process. And when we do that, that increases the flows to our wastewater plant by about 20% of the 157th plant. So we're treating more water and incurring more cost, really on the water side, but it hits the wastewater side. The economies of scale, and what I mean by that is we have basically three treatment plants. And if you were to design it the most efficient way possible, you'd have one centralized plant, and you'd have all the flow coming to the one plant. Here we have some plants that are smaller. They're not as efficient as one larger plant was, but it was the way the system was developed over time. Developers built the system and built the treatment facilities that they could afford with the associated developments. So we're working to make those as efficient as possible. And it's capital intensive. Wastewater treatment and the process is very capital intensive in the operation of that. Finally, the next steps, we're basically near the end. Tonight's meeting, public hearing, is to review the proposed rate structures. If the council supports this rate increases, the rates would become effective January 1st, 2016. And I appreciate your attention, and all those speakers would be very happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. I do have 3 speaker cards. Do we have any other speaker cards? All right. I'll just take them in order that you gave them to me tonight. So I'm going to announce the first speaker, and that's Peter Manerick. If you'll come forth, please. And if you'll just be sure you say your name and your address, and you know that you're limited to 3 minutes. And the lights will, the yellow and the green light will.
Thank you, Mayor.
I know you know the system, so I appreciate you coming forth this evening.
I'm Peter Manerick, and I'm speaking in favor of the water increase. With full disclosure, I was a member of the Water Committee. When I first saw that you asked for volunteers to serve on the Water Committee, my first prejudice was for conservation, and it still holds that I'm very much in favor of that. But over 9 months, I realized that bias was misplaced, and that there is an urgent need, in my opinion, to repair the wells. And so I learned there's a one main well that's decades old, and it's deteriorating. And unfortunately, it's interconnected to the other main well, and so we could have dire problems if it's not addressed. I volunteered for the committee, and when I was interviewed, I told them that water is essential for life. If there's no water, there's no life, there's no city, there's no community. And I came here to be here for the next few decades, and without this water, that becomes an impossibility. Personally, I think I was more of a skeptic of the consultants, and I think it would be fair to say that I was a member who pushed back hard to their recommendations, to their cost proposals, to all their grand plans. I finally think that we came to a very conservative, very modest, minimal impact on low-income families. And I would close by saying I think it's always easy to pretend that problems don't exist. I really respect the fact that you have a very difficult decision to make. It's always easy to pretend, well, the well's pumping today, I won't worry about it. Somebody can worry about it 10 years when it blows up. It won't be on my watch. I urge you to know how serious this city is with respect to its water supply, and I speak very very strongly that we need this rate increase, a very modest one in my opinion, to allow for us to have water today and tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maneri, for your remarks and for your work. All right, the next one we'll call is Jason Batten. And Jason is the vice chair of the Water Planning Committee.
Yes, ma'am. Mayor, council, thank you. Again, I just want to reiterate what Peter had brought up. We did spend approximately 9 months going over this. I'm a complex man in work, but I'm a simple man when it comes to words. I've been doing water and wastewater now for 17 years in Arizona. I've also spoken with previous and current employees as to the status of our system, the reality of it. And as Peter pointed out, we have pushed off because of monetary problems, finance, 08, all that stuff. This got pushed, and we're at a time now where, unfortunately, we have to absorb the cost for this. I'm 100% behind this. There is no way I want to see the city I've lived in since 1998, bought a home right down the street, getting the paper for we don't have water supply. Businesses will not come here. Residents will not move in. Home values will drop. There's a lot of side effects that happen to it. Currently, I work for the city of Buckeye in wastewater treatment, and we've been rehabbing plants. The number, 50 million, is hard for anybody to swallow. There's no doubt about that. But I can tell you that we took over 3 wastewater plants that were ran by private companies and not maintained to the level maybe that they should have or could have been. We're now investing approximately $10 million just to get those 3 plants back up to a standard of effluent that we want to produce. And as Mr. Beckley said, you have to produce good effluent to put it back in the ground. Everything, this whole system is a big loop. The water gets pulled up, it goes to the wells, it gets delivered to the houses, it gets recaptured from the houses and sent to a wastewater treatment plant where all of the, quote, nasties are taken out of it, and it's returned back into the ground. That's the way we save water. That's the way we don't have to buy so much from CAP. So in closing, this is it's overdue, and we put a lot of time into it. I pushed really hard on the rate, flattening out the rate increases. They were definitely more front-loaded at first because there was urgency of needing to get it done. But for my neighbors and everybody else, it's easier if we can absorb a known quantity each year, a realistic increase. No other commodity out there, not gold, not gas, not anything, stays the same. Everything goes up. Water goes up with it. We want to ensure that citizens, myself, my neighbors, everybody have it available, and it's time that we have to put this forward. So I appreciate you guys' time.
I just want to thank you, Mr. Batten. Thank you for your 17 years of experience and the reality of it all. Your mayor has had that conversation with me many times, so thank you for your work for Buckeye. Okay, so let's go to Mario Columbia, who is the water planning chairman.
Mayor Lord, Vice Mayor Lauren Tonnell, city and city staff. My name is Mario Columbia, and I was the chairman of the Water Planning Committee. On our very last meeting, I remember everybody was all pretty tense. We knew we were getting ready to sign off for a $57 or so million project, and I told everybody, it's an investment, not an expense. Once I mentioned those words, they started looking at things a little bit differently. As Peter mentioned, we're looking at the future. Let's move forward, and let's not stay behind. Through 2007 through 2010, we really didn't do much to our water wastewater systems. So what happened, we have a lot of older products out there. My neighbors, this is a funny story, but as I go through the 9 months, none of my neighbors talk to me. Here comes out the recommendations report. Next thing you know, everyone's stopping me. And I had one neighbor in particular says to me, why? I said, so it's because it's an investment, not an expense. I said, did you realize you have pumps that are out there somewhere between 40 and 50 years? He stood back, said, I didn't realize that. I says, and guess what? They're out of age. We need to replace them. Think about that. We need to move forward. We need water for our kids, for our kids' kids. So tonight, I mean, I didn't come prepared with a speech or anything, but I do want to say my team supported this plan, and I really hope you folks would take a look at it seriously and understand we need to move forward. It's an investment, not an expense. And that's really all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Columbia, for being the chairman of this, and thank you for the expression investment, not an expense in future, and I'm sure we will remember those words. Thank you very much. So I'm assuming that there are no other cards. Okay, so we're going to close the public hearing. And will the city clerk please read resolution number 15-1718, adopting the proposed 5-year water and wastewater rate structure and providing an effective date.
Adopt resolution number 15-1718, adopting the proposed 5-year water and wastewater rate structure and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Could I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
I had a motion by Vice Mayor Loretano and a second by Councilman Osborne. Now open for council discussion. Who would like to start? All right, Vice Mayor.
I want to start by thanking the Water Committee, the chair, the vice chair, and the committee members that have come here and worked so hard for the last 9 months. This was a very hard committee. It's a very hard technical committee. And it's also hard to be the ones to recommend that, nobody wants to say we need to raise any fees. That would be very nice, but that's not the world we live in. And I think everything has been covered. And I think that's very good to say. It's an investment in our future, and it's a needed and necessary investment. Water is not a luxury, it's a requirement. And I think we need to make this investment, and I think it's been done soundly and with our community, going out to our community and getting those thoughts. And with the Water Committee, I think it's great how we involve our citizens. And for that, I am going to definitely vote for it because we do need to make sure we have a good water system for the next 50 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice. On this side, Councilman Osborne.
Thank you. Well, I have a couple of questions and some comments. I'll start with the questions first. I'm not sure who would like to answer them, but on your slide, page 29, I guess, it's regarding the average usage by Goodyear commercial customers. I know that you were basing some of these things kind of on average size of pipes, and you had a 2-inch, let's see, 29, I guess really the simple question is, are we requiring commercial projects to have a 2-inch line, or is that that's the average that you put up there? I was just for clarification.
No, that was an average that was put up. A 2-inch meter would be necessary for someone that used 50,000 gallons a month. We do have commercial customers that use significantly less and have smaller.
Okay. Well, I know that, and I was just making sure that we weren't sticking with, 2 inches as a base. All right. Then the next page, page 30, you have a couple of fees on there. I just wanted clarification on the water audit fee. Explain to me what that is.
I will give you what I think it is, but I've got some staff behind me. Mark, I think, could come up and address if I misspeak on it. First, if you notice right below it, it says if canceled less than 24 hours prior. The fee itself applies if they set up an appointment and then cancel it. But the water audit, that's where someone is having a concern of how much water they're using.
So it's actually free.
I don't believe we charge for that.
Yeah, Mark, why don't you just kind of read?
This is only if I say I want one and then I cancel.
Before 24 hours, correct. Okay, so I was going to say, don't we want them auditing their
We've had that for some time. We actually had a program. We actually had a program in to encourage people who had questions, and so that's
of course. That's why I was clarifying some of these. Now, I know that especially when we get to, I think the next page, page 31, regarding deposits. So some of these,
they make sense. I understand the deposit wise, but I'm curious because I know what Liberty does, and I'm not sure what our policy is. If we sign somebody up for automatic payments out of their checking accounts, Liberty will not charge a deposit fee. And so I was curious on what we do different or not on that.
At this point in time, our structure is that we charge for that if they don't have the credit history. I think that that's a valid point for us to consider bringing back. It's something we can talk about, but currently today, it goes with the history.
Right. Well, I just thought, I was pleasantly happy that, for my commercial project, I wasn't going to have to pay any kind of deposit. It was because I was going to set up on an automatic payment system. So, that's another nice thing that can be helpful to residents and businesses when we look at that. Okay, those are my questions. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
My comments. Thank you. First of all, thank you to the committee. I really appreciate the hard work that you put into this, and I'm sure that this was passionate for you guys, and I'm sure you learned more than you cared to know on some of it too. But you know what? To make the best decision you guys could make, you had to know it all, and so I really appreciate the time you put into it. I'm sensitive to our citizens. I'm sensitive to the ones that say, I can't afford this. It may only be $7 more a month, but you know what? That is $7 more a month, and I'm strapped. I really do feel for them, and I understand that. But I also know that the responsibility of the city, first and foremost, is safety and water. I mean, my goodness, Arizona is in the position that it is when it comes to water. Because we have been thoughtful, knowing that, in a sense, it is a requirement to our lives, but it is almost a luxury in Arizona because it is so valuable to us. But it comes at a cost. And, and I think it's very important that the justifications speak for themselves. And it is the conditions, it is the redundancy, it is the investment in the future. And I think that, as we go forward, I know that there's going to be more investment needed because if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me, staff, if I'm wrong, is that we're not even touching yet the fact that we are not connected to the CIP for wet water. And we're going to have to do that within 10 years. And so, you know what? That's coming down the actual pipe itself, too. And so we're going to have to be looking at that. And, and I don't know what kind of grant programs there are. I really give great congratulations to the city of Maricopa for being able to get a Tiger grant. That's, and I don't know if Tiger grants are only for transportation issues, but if that was something, a Tiger grant that we could go after for the next 5 to 8 years as a region, saying all these cities need to connect to the CIP, we need to look at this in a regional way. And so I know that we have a lot to do in the future, but I'm going to have to support this because it's the right thing to do and it's our responsibility for our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Stipp, do you want it? He had his finger up first, so that's why.
I think I had more than just one finger, but anyway. Bob, I'm going to fire these off, I think, to you, and then you're probably going to bring in Larry on a couple of these questions. I also have questions and a quick statement, but it was unclear to me during the number of slides of how will impact fees affect the funding for some of these CIP projects. It looked like there was CIP was going to cover part of it, but there were parts of it that weren't able to be covered by impact fees that we would have to. Is that how I read? Did I read that correctly?
I think so. It was some of the West Goodyear lines is an example of it. Those lines would be put in with impact fee credits, and those would be funded out of that impact fee revenue that it's derived from that.
But the monies that we're talking about that are affecting the rates are not including those new lines anyway.
That's correct.
So is it safe to say that all of the impact fees that we have already collected for water for the most part, I know Larry doesn't like to say all, but for the most part, have already been put into the system. So really what we're talking about, the improvements now are future improvements.
I think that's a Larry.
I think I can clarify first. The impact fees that we collect are based on the study that we did, and all of those are restricted for that purpose. There's a couple of issues in that line item that you're asking about. One issue is from a previous development agreement, there are properties out there that have a restriction in what their fees are. They pay less than our impact fee amount. We still have to go out and put that infrastructure in that's in that plan. We aren't collecting those dollars from the others. For the non-utility impact fees, we're using a portion of the construction sales tax. But for the impact fees, that source of funding has to come from the rates. That's the only thing available. But the other thing that Bob was also referring to, and you saw oversizing, and that's a key part of that also. You can only charge a developer for that proportionate share that they're contributing to the growth. So let's say a developer's coming in, and to serve their development, they only need a 12-inch line. But our system requires that in the long term, we need a 24-inch line. You have a couple of choices. You can say, okay, put in your 12-inch line, and then 3 years later, when someone develops down the road, you put in another line that'll get to them, or you oversize it and put the 24-inch line in there. Because of the structure of impact fees and the complexities of that, we need to have some money available that we can oversize a line, and this is really the only means of making that available.
Okay. Hang on. I think an observation when we talk about comparables with other cities is we're one of the few cities that don't run the entire water system. I think left. I think Buckeye bought all of theirs, but for the most part, aren't we about the only one that really? I think Avondale owns their own water system, if I'm not mistaken, their own water and wastewater system for the entire city.
Well, I know there are others that are in a similar position. Surprise being one, over half of their city is
okay.
Arizona American.
All right, so I think we just for the future, we should be careful about when we talk about comparables, when we talk about water and wastewater. But I would like to get back to my statement a month or so ago about looking at the future and perhaps not with this work that we've done, but this water problem is not just a south of Goodyear water problem, and we've got to figure out a way to finance this across the entire city. Some of it is operational and truly belongs in the enterprise, and some of it is for the health and welfare of the entire city. If we let our water system collapse south of I-10, the people and the residents and the tax base north of I-10 cannot sustain a collapsed structure below south of I-10. And I think we have to start looking at that. So that, and I don't know if there's a way that we can distribute any of these CIP costs at this time. When I raised the question before, I think the answer was no. What we're talking about is correcting and fixing today's problems for today's water system. Is that?
That's accurate. Yes.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to do that, and then finally, we've talked about doing this, and the rates are going to go out through 2020. Is that then to assume that we are not going to look at restudying this in a year and then coming up with a whole new set of that this will be good through 2020?
No, actually, the Integrated Water Master Plan report is providing the technical data as far as examples would be. We will be needing more capacity. We'll need more water. Our capacity is increasing. So the water necessary to support the growth of this community is going to be projected out into the next 20 years. We're going to determine when we will run up into some critical points in which we need additional capacities, or as Councilman Osborne mentioned, when we need to bring in the cap water and begin to utilize surface water. When that, and we'll also be looking at other alternative means of access to new water supplies. So we'll begin to develop the framework for what the necessary expenditures are for the future. With that information, we over probably the next 4 to 5 years will begin to assess when we need to bring in those new sources of revenue to support those activities. So the next rate package will probably be over the next 3 to 4 years, and then we will assess where we need to go from that point on in terms of new rates, new borrowing requirements, and also the cost of service.
Okay, thank you for that. So there, essentially at this, there is really no way around where we're at, and I greatly appreciate the work of the committee to push the staff. I'm very glad to hear that that we were pushing up against and challenging the assumptions that were being made. That's very important in our system, that we're not just taking the experts' word for it. And I think that made for a stronger outcome at the end. And I greatly appreciate all the work of the committee. As far as the greater community, those that are listening, those that will report on this, that as it comes out, we really have no choice. We're in this is I don't want to say deferred maintenance kind of problem, but really, we're behind and we need to get caught up, and water isn't anything that we can wait until, the next great idea, and this is not something that technology is going to solve. This is literally pipes in the ground and pumps moving and water moving. So, again, just thank you for staff entertaining the questions, and look forward to future discussions about how do we fund the additional improvements that we need later.
Councilman Basillo.
And there's not a whole lot to add after all that discussion, except giving of your time to the city to ensure the water supply of the city. Again, I want to thank you. I know it's been said around here, but I always say it when I get a chance for any volunteer. Giving them the time is what makes this a great community. Stepping up, you could be doing something else other than spending all those hours, but we do really, truly appreciate what you've done. What kind of grabbed my attention was the example that Bob had given when I found out we had one well in which was blending, and if one goes down, you have two that goes down. No backup for that. So again, to me, this is an investment. We've got to make a system that has redundancies within redundancies to ensure that we have that water supply, and how close we came to that breakdown. To me, I'm pleased that we have addressed that issue. When it comes to funding the bigger position, I'm always interested in looking, but I'm a staunch supporter of it's an enterprise fund. Growth pays for itself. So if we're going to get outside funding, because people north of 10 are paying their capital share and paying for the water they're getting, I'd be curious to see what that funding source may be, where we're not double hitting the people north of 10. So I'll be looking forward to that discussion.
And I just want to add to this before I go on to Councilman Campbell, is that hasn't been too long since we've done that, where we are an enterprise fund, where the people living in the north, living in the south, we're supporting each other. So, when you think about where we've come from, at the time frame, we haven't been there very long. So sometimes it takes a little more patience. Councilman Campbell?
Well, I just wanted to assure the residents that the city is looking after your interests to the very best of our ability. We can't afford to have the well go down completely, because then it will be a crisis. And what you may not understand is that when the wells were built, as Mr. Beckley told us, the developers built them not like the water supplies are now today, and we have taken them over and they're all interconnected. Some are better than others, but they're all old, and we can't afford to have them all go down, because there would come a time where when we shut one well down, the next one will go down, and then we'll not have the water. We know that we need transmission lines to move this water. We're going to be doing all we can to try to figure out how we can do it at a reasonable cost for everyone, because we've got to have the water to develop this city. We also know that the CAP water, while $171 an acre foot sounds expensive, it's $1,000 to $2,000 an acre foot in California. It's $220 to $568 per acre foot in our neighboring state of New Mexico. So we have a cheap water rate, but we still have to pay that money to use that water for the CAP. So I want you to know we're going to be working on your behalf to keep the cost as reasonable as we possibly can and provide you with the very best water that we can. And we want to thank all of you for coming tonight, for our committee, for working so diligently. It's never easy to look at a problem and a perceived problem until you're convinced it really is a problem. And I appreciate all of the members of the committee coming forth and telling us they were skeptical about it, but as they got into our problem with the repairs that are needed, the new equipment that we desperately need, they understood the importance of this and how critical it is at this time. So thank you all very much, and that's all I have to say.
I guess that
One question.
All right.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah, no,
forgot
Councilman
one more
Osborne.
question. When you spoke about, I know that we're going to have a separate line item on the bill for our customers, indicating that whatever this amount was going towards the CAP. I just wanted to make sure that you think about the language that is stated on explaining what that is, because knowing that we still have a long way to go with that investment with the CAP, I don't want there to be any thought that, oh, this is covering it, and that, this is going to cover for the future, because there's still going to be that the future's coming. And so I just want to make sure that whatever language you come up with, that you make sure it sounds like it's current and not, future statement. So, okay?
Good point. We will.
All right. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank the committee. I want to thank you for your tenacity, your time, and your dedication. It was stretching for you. I know there was a number of hours and very, very difficult, but that's leadership. And you came to the table and produced that leadership we need. And you used all your experiences, and I really appreciate it. And you put yourself in a terrible position with your neighbors. And I know as a mayor, when I go to the store or I go to church or wherever I go, I'm always confronted by a number of people with a number of concerns. And so you're going to know what that feels like. But we haven't solved our problem, but you have brought forth just about every aspect of this that we have to concentrate on, and I really appreciated it. So, and I do want, as the council, to know, and of course, this hasn't been a very robust effort on my part, but we have gone to Congress, and I have gone to Senator McCain's office, and we are talking about it, and Mark Holmes had told me about a grant years ago that they had for infrastructure. So it may be the time now to bring that back, but with the help of staff next time we're in Washington in a program that we'll attack this, and certainly going to try that. So my advice to you, anytime you have the ears of any of our Congress, just mention something and our plight. But it's all of the West Valley, and we're going to need it for continuing to develop our city. So. Again, thank you to everybody, to the consultant. Thank you very much. Thank you for your leadership and all your knowledge. And I will say that this report that we have, I hope that everybody is going to keep it on your iPad or put it on your main computer, for the city, so we can reflect back on that. All right, because we have a tendency sometimes to forget things. And so we can just be sure we're using those. So we stay with a consistent conversation, a dynamic conversation, and it grows, okay? All right, good. So any other before the council before I close this? All right. So let's go on. It's now closed. So I need a motion and a second.
Mayor, you already have a motion and a
Oh,
second.
I'm sorry.
You
Would
just
you
need
read
to
it
do a
from-
roll call.
Okay. All right. Roll call vote. Sorry.
Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Councilmember Campbell?
Aye.
Councilmember Stipp?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Osborne?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
You know, it's very difficult to talk and get involved and run a meeting.
All right.
So you'll all have to live with that. Okay, so let's go to 7.2 to consider a preliminary plat for Pebble Creek Phase 2, Unit 55. Chris Floden, architectural planner, to present.
I think it's Joe.
Oh, Joe. Well, on my notes it said. Okay. Well, they should have cut it off then, crossed it out. Hello.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Before Mr. Schmitz gets into his presentation this evening on Pebble Creek Unit 55, as many of you know, Pebble Creek has been developing for a number of years in our community, and we're excited to have this next phase. Mr. Schmitz has taken the project over, so he'll be making the presentation to you this evening. In addition to Mr. Schmitz's presentation, Rebecca Zook, our Director of Engineering, will certainly be available to answer any technical engineering questions that you may have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Not very well.
We're having trouble hearing you when you talk, so.
That or get closer to the mic, one or the other. We just can't really hear you.
All right, Mayor and Council, good evening. Filling in for Chris Floden, who has taken a position with a private firm and is no longer with the city, unfortunately. So
We just have to make sure that the city clerk gets that information on. I knew that he was leaving, but get the right name on who's doing the presentations the next time. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
this is a request for approval of the preliminary plat for Pebble Creek Phase 2, Unit 55, which proposes to subdivide 41.63 acres into 217 single-family lots, 6 open space tracts generally located at the northeast corner of McDowell Road and the Loop 303. The Pebble Creek community was developed in 2 phases. You have Phase 1, which is basically east of Pebble Creek Parkway over to Bullard and south of Indian School Road, and Phase 2, which is on the west side of Pebble Creek Parkway and extends over to the Loop 303 from McDowell at the south end to Indian School Road at the north. Unit 55 is kind of hunkered down here in the corner at the northeast corner of McDowell Road. And
Joe, is that blurry to you or is it my eyes?
it's blurry. I
Okay.
can't seem to get it focused any better than.
Sorry. Well, I've got it here. I printed it out, but that's better. Because it's right against
That one moves it a little bit closer to the site. Developer, Pebble Creek Properties Limited Partnership, better known as Robeson Communities, is proposing 2 types of housing product within Unit 55. Unit 55 is the 41.63 acres outlined in red, which is just west of 169th Avenue, which is in place right now. There are 2 types of housing product proposed. I apologize that I can't apparently get that to focus better. At the south end of the project, highlighted in yellow, are 48 60 by 110 foot conventional single-family detached residential lots. And the balance of the site. Maybe we need New Elmo. I'm starting to wonder. The balance of the site is going to be developed with the villas product, which will have 169 villa lots, of which 162 would be configured as attached duplex units. That's the same type of product that is currently under construction near the intersection of Indian School and Saraville Road. The property is zoned medium-density residential in the Pebble Creek Resort Community Planned Area Development, which allows from 5 to 12 dwelling units per acre. Proposed density for Unit 55 is 5.21 dwelling units per acre, which is at the low end of the range for this zoning classification. And although this property was entitled prior to the current general plan, the proposed development is consistent with the general plan and compatible with the surrounding area. The preliminary plat provides for 9.46 of open space between the lot groupings and represents about 22.7% of this unit's development. At its closest point, Unit 55 at the south end is about a half to 3/4 of a mile away from the 65 LDN noise contour for Luke Air Force Base. As a result of a development agreement negotiated between the city and the developer in 2005, the developer agreed to remove all planned residential uses from within the 65 LDN noise contour, which was established by the 1988 West Side Joint Land Use Study. In addition, the developer agreed to erect a perimeter wall and landscaping along the western boundary of the property to help mitigate noise from the Loop 303. The existing perimeter wall was constructed in 2006 in accordance with the development agreement and city standards. The stipulations of approval for this preliminary plat also include aggressive notification of future purchasers of the potential impacts from noise from the operation of aircraft at Luke, the I-10 and Loop 303 freeways, and Arizona Motorsports Park. The disclosure and notification includes providing information in the public sales report for the project, placing a note on the plat, displaying a sign in the sales office, and signing a waiver at closing. Fire department services for this site will be provided from fire station number 185, which is at the entrance to this phase 2 at the intersection of Pebble Creek Parkway and Clubhouse Drive. Water and wastewater utilities will be provided to the development by Liberty Utilities, and stormwater runoff will be retained within the project. At the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting held on September 16th, the Commission voted 4-0 to recommend approval of the preliminary plat, subject to the stipulations contained within the staff report. And since the time of the Commission meeting, staff met with the developer and modified some of the stipulations in the recommendation. And at this point, staff would further recommend that stipulations number 6 and number 7 be deleted from any motion to approve, as they have been addressed with the city engineering department and are no longer needed to be included. So that's the removal of stipulations 6 and 7.
Thank you.
That concludes my presentation. I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Appreciate that. Are there any speaker cards? Okay, would anybody in the audience like to speak? Then could I please have a motion and a second to approve a request for the preliminary plat for Pebble Creek Properties Limited Partnership to subdivide approximately 41.63 acres into 217 single-family residential lots and 6 open space tracts for development known as Pebble Creek, Unit 55, generally located at the northeast corner of McDowell Road and Loop 303, Zone PAD, subject to stipulations. Do I hear a motion and a second?
So move.
Second.
I heard a motion by Councilman Campbell and a second by Councilman Pizzillo. I got you at the vice again. Okay. Open for council discussion.
I've got a question, please.
Yes, Councilman Campbell.
I've got a couple of questions, Joe. Looking at the map, the Robeson Corporation wants to build 48 single-family homes and 169 villas. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right.
The villas would be located along the west boundary of the site, and
Right.
configured around each of the cul-de-sacs.
All right. Also, I would like to ask the city manager, there's a couple of stipulations that are in here that I'm really, I'm surprised that they're in here, and I don't understand why they're in here, and I'm going to vote for this, but I would like someone on staff to talk to me about some of these stipulations that we're putting on these developers so that I can understand why we're doing it, because I'm not sure they're necessary. Some are, some aren't. And some of the way we're telling them how to site the house on the lot and where the garage can go. I mean, I don't understand. I specifically 19 and 20, so, but I don't want to do it tonight, so if you would let me sit with staff sometime. Sure. And you can tell me why we're doing this, and then I can argue why we might not want to do that.
We would be glad to do that.
Thank you. Okay.
Any other
That's
questions? Yes, Councilman Loretano.
I just kind of have a quick question. Since we've had lots of issues about the noise in similar areas, I know we have it as a stipulation, but what else are we going to do to reach out? Because I would hate to have a very similar problem that we've had as the freeway grows and the other interchange is built.
Is the developer here?
So I just want to clarify that. So you're talking about future buying, or you're talking about the people that are involved at this time in this study?
Well, I know we always say there's going to be signs up, there's going to be information that the developer is going to give out, but I guess I don't know what else we can do to get that information out, because the freeway I-10 was there, and then we still had people, and we did the noise study. I mean, I don't know how else, or if there's anything else we can do.
Well, I'm going to tell you, as being in those model homes all the time, they've done everything they possibly can do. And I've said this before, there is some responsibility that must go on the buyer when they come into a development and look. And I think that they have done a real good job of posting and explaining. And it really, for the most part, all you do is go over there a couple times a week. You can get it all just by walking, just by walking in the area. It's very obvious. Everybody is fully aware. You hear the planes, you know if you're going to buy right next to the line where the street is, you're going to hear it. I hear Indian school once in a while when I go out my front door. I knew it when I bought the house. So you're going to do it.
It's pretty obvious in those.
It's very obvious.
We can only take so much responsibility for people's decision making, and I think we've done a real good job of trying to help with this latest concern on, of course, the rubberizing. And if the wall is necessary or not necessary, if it's going to be worse or better. I think we've just gone to great extents, and we'll finish that up. But I think to ask more than what we're doing now.
Oh, I'm not saying ask more. I just wondered, because my concern is, when's it going to be rubber? Does that information, because I don't get to go in that part because you guys are gated off.
Well,
so I would just like to know, it's good to know that they do have it posted and it's very clear to the people buying
They do,
out there.
and they actually sent a picture to me recently, and we have it somewhere, exactly what the sign looks like in the model home. It's placed right there. As we walk in, you can see it. It's well done. It's in color. So they've done a very, very good job at that. But maybe what we need is just a review on where we're paving, because you're questioning the paving business, and so you're talking about McDowell. Is that what you're talking about? And
it's going to be McDowell. The 303 is also going to get some
Mayor,
someday, but not. It's slated off several years, right?
Those are the little things that council has to be reminded of on some of those things, and it just is helpful.
And I would like to just remind council, because I live in Pebble Creek, to buy in there, you are taken to all of the vacant property, and you literally walk the lots. So I personally walked these lots this past weekend. I was very aware of everything going on around me, as everyone was. So if anyone does say they didn't know about it, I just find it hard to believe, because it's obvious. You can see the loop, you can see 303, you can see Interstate 10, and you can hear the planes and see them sometimes. And wave.
Councilman Osborne.
Thank you. I do believe our general plan has stated, and that was voted upon by our citizens, that they don't like residential being built against a freeway. And I have voted against items that were exactly of this type, so I will not be supporting this project. Thank you.
I have to say a comment on this. When this development was done, people voted for it. It was another general plan. It was planned. So I can understand, Councilman Osborne, your change of, or maybe that was your position. But you have to remember, for the developers, there were a position we all took back then, and we owe it to them to be true to our decision making when we pass it. So, Bill, were you just joking, or did you want to talk?
I actually wanted to talk.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Councilman Stiff.
So can you go back to the color? And I think it's the pulled back color version. Nope. One closer. That one. It looks orange on what I'm looking at here. I don't know what it looks like anywhere else. What is that orangish red area right in the center? Is that retention?
Stiff, that's designated high density or residential.
That little orange area right there in the middle?
I thought maybe it was a retention area.
Okay, so then that definitely leads to high density residential. Is that what you just said?
Yes.
Is that like 12 or 10? Is that an apartment?
12 plus units per acre.
Basically an apartment building?
Oh, no.
I think at one point in time they were might have been considering to do some multifamily there. I don't know what their current plans are.
Would that be the kind of density that would allow a care facility?
A what?
Care facility.
It would be consistent with that density, although we have seen a lot of them locate on properties that are commercial in nature as well.
But they would be allowed there. Here, let me jump to my next. I know that they're having difficulty wanting to place one at the corner of Pebble Creek and Clubhouse. And if we've already got it zoned in there, is it possible that we could end up with one inside?
I'd have to look at the PAD, Councilman Stipp, to see what uses were allowed or not allowed on that property.
Okay.
Before I could answer definitively.
Yeah, and I don't remember that discussion taking place at the big meeting because people were suggesting that. And the Robeson had said, no, this is the area that they had planned for it. So
okay.
That conversation came from the group.
Right, but times have changed.
But it's a good question to ask, but again, it's up to the developer.
Right, and it will feed into my next question. And I noticed in the staff report we talk about it's going to be covered by Fire Station 185, which is currently 3 miles away. We're with 185 where it currently sits. We're reaching its maximum. And actually, I think that's even outside of the ISO requirement for fire station location for an engine company. So from a city perspective, and the reason that this is very fresh in my mind is I'm currently working on 2 projects that are looking at fire station locations. And right now, we're running into some danger areas in the city of continuing to build homes because we think we're close enough. So have we done any response time analysis into this area? Time travel, nothing?
Chief, could you come up and just address that a little bit, please?
You say, Chief, get them both
But
to
they're
flinch.
just coming from the main gate. It ought to be pretty quick. I mean, it's a straight shot.
We have a lot of really direct gates.
But Councilmember Campbell, I'm talking about going all the way down to that back southwestern corner. Not to the orange area now where I was talking about earlier, but we're increasing the density. We're putting these duplexes in there. We've got a high multifamily in there, and now we're going to be outside of a 2.5 mile circle.
Right. Yeah, no, we have not looked at that. We will certainly start to look at that as this
starts to progress through.
I think one time you were up just recently and you had a number. You said there was a certain number that would trigger that, and it hadn't been triggered yet. So
Yeah, it's 500 calls per year.
Okay.
In that area, and then the development is a certain mileage away from the station, and the response time is greater than 8 minutes for 30% on the calls.
So at this point,
not at this point. I mean, there's.
Okay, I just want to clarify
Well,
that.
Correct. Well, there's nothing there, so there's
Right.
going to be no reason to do it. But if we did a drive time analysis of where the streets are laid out, GIS should be able to pop that out within an hour and tell us how far we are. So perhaps in the future, if we start looking at, instead of saying it's within a 3-mile radius, we start actually coming up with how far away from the fire station it is, travel time-wise, we may be able to make better decisions or start the wheels turning in someone else's department in the city to say, hey, we need to start thinking about a fire station. There is no other location for Pebble Creek other than 185. I mean, there's just plain not.
Correct.
So we're going to have an area that's going to be uncovered. But I'm talking about the next area that we build west of there or the next area south of there, that we're going to end up developing fire stations or the need for fire stations much faster than we have the capacity to staff them. So I'm just putting that on everyone's radar screen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments? All right, let's, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Mayor, may I add one thing? Just not
Sorry, I should've-
not so much in regards to this particular development proposal, but to Vice Mayor Loretano's comment about what are we doing in regards to noise. Your staff has heard the noise concern come from the council, and we are going to be conducting a noise audit of these projects that have the stipulations on them regarding the notification of the map in the sales offices and the public sales reports. We are in the preliminary stages of identifying the locations of those particular neighborhoods that have those stipulations attached to them, so we can ensure that our future residents are being appropriately notified with the most up-to-date information. That's not to impugn our development community friends that they're doing anything wrong, but we just want to ensure that the same information is being provided to all of our future residents so we can hopefully move past this particular issue.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, let's go to 7.3. This is to consider job creation agreement with REI. Michelle Laurie, Economic Development Director, to present.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm very pleased to be in front of you this evening to talk about one of our newest corporate citizens, and that's our Recreational Equipment Incorporated, better known as REI. And before I begin, I just want to introduce two representatives from REI who are here from Seattle this evening. And one is Bill Best, the Divisional Vice President of Supply Chain Operations, and Chris Joyce, the Director of Operations, that will be here in Goodyear starting in January. So we're pleased to have them here. Thank you. And I also wanted to recognize Harry Paxton there, our project manager, who is in charge of the project.
Thank you. Welcome, gentlemen.
Well, we're certainly proud to have a brand like REI in our community. And REI is a popular provider of quality outdoor gear and clothing with a very large online presence, as well as 143 stores in 33 states. The company is a co-op, which is very interesting, not publicly traded company, where members pay $20 for a lifetime membership. And they're able to become members, and they get profits back from the company at the end of each year, kind of depending on what they're buying, what they're purchasing. And they get member benefits as well. Of course, anyone can shop there, members, non-members, or so forth. But not only has REI been ranked as one of the 100 best companies to work for, but it has a reputation of giving back in its communities. A little bit about how this project came to be. In 2014, REI began its process for a Southwestern distribution center. In February of 2014, Goodyear was in the mix of communities being evaluated, and we offered, subject to city council advice and approval, and an economic analysis. We agreed to support the FTZ status and to provide $300,000 in expedited plan review waivers. In April of this year, REI announced its plans to build a 400,000 square foot facility in Goodyear's PV 303 Park. and expects a LEED Gold certification and aims for Platinum certification as well. Just showing you the location of REI there, right above Dix and Sub-Zero on the 303. And I want to make a clarification on this slide here. It actually is the east building elevation. It's as you're looking west off of the 303. So that beautiful building will be as people are going on the 303 looking to the west. In the agreement, which is before you this evening, there are really three major provisions for REI, which are to employ and maintain at least 125 full-time workers, to provide full-time employees with an average salary of at least $35,000, and provide at least 65% of all full-time employees' health care insurance premiums, and also to invest $70 million in real estate and equipment. And the Goodyear agreement provisions wanted to point out that REI is responsible for paying standard permit and plan review fees, that we will waive and reimburse up to a maximum of $300,000 in expedited plan review fees related to construction of the facility, and we will assist and support the activation of a user-driven foreign trade zone, or FTZ, at the location of the Goodyear facility. The economic impact, we always do an economic impact analysis for each project that we come into an agreement with. And ESI Corporation did this one as a 7-year economic analysis. And they estimate that REI's operations in Goodyear will total more than $143.5 million in total economic output for the next 7 years. So that's direct and indirect. Then that'll include increased property and sales tax revenues generated by the operations, as well as what its employees, vendors, and service providers are spending. So direct revenue to the city is estimated to be $2.6 million over the next 7 years. And then also wanted to highlight the resulting infrastructure investments, which is very important, especially to our community. With the location of REI, Sunbelt Holdings is investing approximately $2.3 million in public and private infrastructure, and that is really on that access off of 303 on the west side onto Camelback Road, and then improving that intersection of Camelback Road and Cotton Lane. The infrastructure improvements will actually make 15 acres along Camelback Road shovel ready, and we know that's very important to us as we get lots of projects that look at that area and want shovel ready land. And that's it for questions and discussion, and didn't know if you had any questions or comments for our guests.
Thank you very much. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody like to speak? All right, will the city clerk please read Resolution 15-1721 by title only, please?
Adopt Resolution Number 15-1721, approving, authorizing, and directing the city manager to execute a job creation agreement for Recreational Equipment Incorporated, authorizing city staff to take actions consistent with terms of resolution and agreement, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Could I have a motion, a second?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Stiff and a second by Councilman Osborne. Okay. Open for council discussion. Councilman Stiff.
I'd simply like to, stay right there. Like to welcome REI to the community. We're excited to have you. We were very pleased with the announcement. At least I was anyway. I'm sure I'm speaking on everyone else's behalf, but welcome. We're looking forward to a great partnership. I just spent the weekend in Seattle, and the company brand is pretty much all over the place up there, so it was kind of neat to see, knowing what we had on the agenda for tonight. So welcome.
I would also like to say welcome, but I've got a question for the director on the expedited fees.
Yeah.
That's done in-house,
Yes.
so we're not going out and paying anybody additionally to do it. It's just staff time. So in essence, it's not costing anything other than the revenues itself. Is that clear? Okay, thank you.
Councilman Lortano.
I also just want to say welcome to Goodyear, and so the public knows who haven't heard of what a good community partner REI is, that they are going to have the community room as well for our citizens to use, and it's just a really good partnership, so welcome.
Councilman Campbell.
Well, I have family in the Seattle area, and my husband and I used to own a home in Gig Harbor on the Sound. So we're very familiar with REI, and we were so excited to learn you were even looking at Goodyear. This will be a wonderful market for you, I think, or it's a perfect place to put your distribution center because of the 303 and 10 and the wonderful city that you're coming into to work with, of course. But we do want to welcome you, and we do thank you. You're such a wonderful store, and I know folks love to shop at your store, and it's always busy. And you have everything. And I buy gift cards at Christmas time for my kids to use up in Seattle. So it's a win.
Councilman Osborne.
Well, I just want to say welcome, and I do believe that you've made a very good decision in choosing Goodyear. Thank you for coming here. I think you have some great neighbors, and I'm sure you're going to continue to see great growth around you, and we really appreciate you choosing us. Thank you.
Well, from the mayor, welcome to the neighborhood. We're happy to have you. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Campbell? Aye. Councilmember Stipp?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Loretano?
Aye.
Councilmember Osborne?
Aye.
Councilmember Pizzillo?
Aye.
Mayor Lord?
Aye.
Passes 6-0.
All right, let's go to 7.4 to consider amendment to the IGA with RPTA. Hello, Christina McMurdy, Grants Administrator, to present.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is the amendment to the Zoom extension. On August 31st, you approved an IGA in the amount of $66,248, which covered a portion of the route from Estrella Mountain Community College to the Goodyear Community Park North. At the time the IGA was passed, Valley Metro had not finalized the cost estimates for the October transit service changes for the region. So tonight we're asking for your approval for the remaining miles of service from the park, Goodyear Community Park North, to Palm Valley Boulevard just east of the hospital, which is an additional $52,659, bringing that total for the service through June of 2016 to $118,907. All of the funds necessary to pay for the Zoom extension are designated for transit use only. There are no general funds in this amount, in this expenditure, and the funds are a combination of the local transportation assistance funds, which is the lottery funds that we have a pretty generous balance of at this time, and some federal transit funds to offset the matching costs that we have to provide. Service started today, which I happened to notice as I was coming down McDowell Road, and I saw the Zoom make a turn to the east, and it was pretty cool. Nice big gray bus coming through Goodyear. There was nobody on it, but it was about 7 o'clock in the morning, so we're going to allow for some route maturity. But as you can see, these are some of, not all of, but some of the activity centers that are going to benefit from this new service. In particular, our friends in Avondale have let us know more than once in the last year that their residents were looking for a way to get to our target on Litchfield Road, and we're very happy to provide that accommodation. Councilmember Pizzillo, the last time I was here, you had asked my colleague at Valley Metro, Jorge Luna, about ridership. This 15,000 passengers per month has actually been updated in the press release to about 19,000 passengers per month. So their service has grown phenomenally as they've added Tolleson over a year ago and now Goodyear. And we're looking roughly, last fiscal year, about 600 boardings a day. The fare is 50 cents. It's exact change. So if you have a Valley Metro boarding card, that's not going to get you a ride. But if you have $1, they're not going to be able to make change either. You've just paid $1 to get your ride, and that's each way. So your initiated trip is 50 cents. Your return trip is 50 cents. There's the service hours right there on Saturday. In addition to the fare and service hours, the vehicle can accommodate up to 2 wheelchairs and 2 bicycles in the front of the vehicle. We can accommodate about 22 passengers with about 6 that can stand safely. So let's just talk a little bit about the route. What you're seeing there, the red line is the current Zoom route before the Goodyear extension. The green line is the extension, and the gold is our city limits, and the gold you'll just see off to the right and then to the north. The blue icons are current bus stops. They've got all of the bus furniture, the chairs, the shelter. The red icons are existing bus bays that were put in based on our development standards. They don't have the bus furniture, but they do have Zoom bus stop signs installed at the location, so folks know where to go. And within the next month or so, Valley Metro is going to be adding a sticker to those bus stop signs that allow folks to be able to check with their cell phone to see when the next circulator is going to be by, the next Zoom bus will be by. Valley Metro programs bus stops every quarter mile or closer. However, we have two situations here where we deviate just a little bit from that standard. And I want to bring them to your attention because we're going to be looking for feedback from customers, from our bus drivers, to let us know that we really need to take a closer look at making the maybe one or two additional bus stops. The first one is on Litchfield Road, just south of Palm Valley. We've got the hotels and we've got the restaurants right there. Unfortunately, there is no room for us to put a bus stop on Litchfield Road on that westbound side, on the west side of Litchfield, because we have multiple driveways, and the access points don't make it easy for the vehicle to get in and out. Also, the vehicle has to have the accommodation for the ADA ramp that comes down from the bus to be able to get the passengers safely off. We drove in and around that area. We went through the parking lot. The restaurants and the hotels do have the absolute ADA standard that they're required to have, but without an access agreement from any of those businesses, Valley Metro can't really bring the bus on property and stop in front of their business. There is an agreement, and I do have contact information from our friends in economic development, and we're going to reach out if we start getting comments to the effect about, hey, I need to go to the hotel, or I'd really like to go to the restaurant. In the meantime, the closest stop for folks that really want to go there is actually on eastbound McDowell Road. It's that blue bus sign right there at the corner of Litchfield and McDowell. That's actually the best stop to get to the Target as well. And you can safely cross the street in the crosswalks there, which is another key issue. We looked also at the northbound side of Litchfield Road because you can see there's no stops there. There's no stops there because it's all residential. There's really no activity centers there. And if we put a bus stop over there, there would be no safe access, no crosswalks, no traffic signal for pedestrians to go right across the street. So we took a good hard look at that, and we're just going to wait and see what kind of feedback we get from passengers and the bus drivers as they go through the route. The second one I want to bring to your attention is at the hospital, and the mayor's well aware of our efforts to try to get on property. Valley Metro has to provide this access agreement. It's a risk issue. It's obviously something that's important. And at the time, the hospital, when Valley Metro approached them, said, we'd really like to do that, but the only way you can come on our property is if you go through the main entrance, and the same entrance that the emergency vehicles use to get to the emergency room. And that provides a risk for the hospital, which is very understandable. We provided one or two alternatives. Going around the back entrance, we'd have to get permission from Target, possibly going around the side. We really couldn't come to anything in a very short period of time. So we had an excellent dialogue. Our great thanks to the mayor for reaching out, and to Rachel also for helping out with that. We're going to see what kind of feedback we get from passengers and from the drivers again, to see if we need to take another look at this and somehow try to find a way to get on property, because the bus stop that's going to accommodate folks is actually that farthest east blue bus stop sign that you see there. Valley Metro counts it as about a 3-minute walk. I guess I'm born and raised in New York. I'm very spoiled. I don't think of it in minutes. I think of it as, wow, that is so far away from where I'm standing right now. And with the weather, it's just something we need to take into consideration. So we're going to take another look at that. The good news is our city traffic engineer said we may be able to find some right-of-way in and around the hospital there on McDowell Road to maybe put another bus bay in. But again, we don't want to come to you with that kind of request unless we see the need via the passengers and some of the customers. So we'll gather that feedback and bring a lot of information back to you. Probably in April, we'll find out our total costs. They do a reconciliation based on fuel and insurance and the employee rates and those kinds of things. We're pretty close to being dead on in terms of cost, but we'll bring you ridership information much sooner We hope to have something for you in January. It'll be a little slow going in the beginning. It takes a little while for routes to mature. But in the meantime, we sure are excited about this because this is consistent with everything we've brought to you in terms of transit studies that we've done. The Southwest Valley Local Circulator Study, the general plan, the Transportation Master Plan, they all recommended that we just kind of do a little bit of a step forward, try to put a circulator out there and see what kind of a response we get from citizens. So that's what we're really looking forward to. We're totally consistent within that plan. No extra buses needed to be purchased for this. It does use our LTAF funds, which we really needed to do. And we will be getting notification of our fiscal year 16 LTAF funds probably in November, and that'll be probably in and around another $190,000 or so if people continue to play the lottery, which we sure hope that they do. This is my last slide, Mayor and Council. I'm open for questions if you have any.
Thank you so much. Are there any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody in the audience like to speak? All right. Could I please have a motion, a second, to authorize the city manager to execute an amendment to the intergovernmental agreement with the Regional Public Transit Authority, RPTA, to establish responsibility for an extension of the Zoom circular service into Goodyear. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I heard a motion by Councilman Stiff and a second by Councilman Osborne. Open for council discussion. Let me go down this side first. Councilman Campbell.
Okay. Where are the 5 existing bus stops now? Are they the blue ones or the red ones?
The red is the red icons are the new bus stops.
No, I want to know the existing before we added this.
Okay, both the red and the blue were existing bus stops. The red are bus bays that don't have the chair or the advertising kiosk.
We're only adding from Thomas to McDowell.
That is correct.
And so we can drop them off at McDowell by McDonald's, and we can drop them off by the YMCA.
That's correct.
So we can't drop them off anywhere else on Litchfield.
Well, if there is a demand for that, we will be happy to consider it. But at this time, no.
Okay, thanks. And yes or no, we can't drop them off in front of the hospital. We have to drop them off down the road.
A couple blocks away, yes,
Okay.
council member.
All right, and this will be the last amendment. I mean, Valley Metro now knows how much to charge us for this fee, and we won't have to do another amendment.
Mayor, council member Campbell, that is correct.
Okay, good, thank you.
Councilman Osborne.
Well, thank you, Christine. I know that we're happy that this is continuing to go forward. I do have a question, 2 questions, I guess. First of all, I know that you're going to be watching what the need is of the residents and who, the ridership and things like that. I guess one of my concerns regarding the hospital area is that it's going to be the future need, because the future building is about to start occurring more there in that hospital site. I know that we have more entities that are coming, medical plazas that are coming in there, which is going to even cause for more of a need because people are going to have the doctors to go visit and this and that. And so, I really encourage you to talk to these entities about figuring out, because really it's in their best interest as a business also that their patients are able to get to them, easily. So I really think that you need to be, I know you're looking for the ridership now and stuff, but, I think you really need to be thinking futuristic on that regard.
I completely agree.
My other, and I said this, I don't know, a year or 2 ago, but something that I think that as we continue to develop using, mass transit and, people want to feel safe on a bus, and they want it to be clean and all those things that, feel good about using it. And one of the things I still believe wholly in is that in the bus bays, I guess you would say, if we could put some kind of solar lighting, because, it opens at 5:21 a.m. Well, coming now, that's dark. Mm-hmm. And I know if I was somebody, I really wouldn't, or even in the evening, getting dropped off at a dark bus. I just, I know that's, to some maybe it's silly, and to others, no. They understand that, having a lit area, and if it's a way, because we have no infrastructure to get power to those things, if it's some kind of, solar lighting that's on there, I just put it out there as things we think about,
because it's the comfort of the riders. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Mayor, Councilmember Osborne, thank you. We would be happy to put that question out to the vendor that provides those shelters. It's actually a great arrangement. We have a contract with this company where they get some advertising space, and we get a little bit of revenue back from that advertising. So we'd be more than happy to put that question out there and see if, I'm not really sure when our contract gets renewed, but when it does, what the potential is for adding some sort of solar lighting capacity. I think that's a great question. Be happy to bring that forward.
I'm not asking for air conditioning.
No,
but,
no.
At least it's a light.
And I haven't seen that yet in the region, so.
Or missed it, right. Thank you.
Councilman Stiff?
Christine, thanks for the presentation. The only observation, I guess, and concern that I would raise about bus stop or bus bay location is the red one right over the W in West McDowell.
Okay, so
That particular area, if I'm looking to go to Target or anything in that's where I'm getting off, and I'm taking my chances running across the street.
Okay.
So as part of
Okay.
as part of the look at where things are at, I hope we are able to factor in car pedestrian accidents, car bike accidents in that particular area, to figure out if that isn't an issue also. We can't make people walk just because we have a crosswalk doesn't mean they have to use it.
Understood. Thank you, Councilmember Stipp. We'll bring that up to the contractor too and just find out if the drivers have any input on that, whether they encourage them to go to the corner and use the crosswalk.
Yeah,
I'll ask the question. It's hard to impact free will, but in this case, we can encourage people to please use the crosswalk. But we'll also find out if people are getting off there to go to the Target. That's a good question.
Well, I think that becomes a bigger issue. The other side of this is I really don't want to have the conversation 2 years from now or 3 years from now about putting a traffic light in at that little crazy intersection that gets you across between the two, because I'm sure we're going to.
On behalf of the engineering department, Councilmember Stipp, we don't want that traffic signal there either. So
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
But secondarily and most importantly, I really want to thank you and everybody on the staff for doing this. I'm not entirely sure where we stand on public transportation citywide, but this particular location and this particular route, I think, meets a huge need for even our own economic development, if you will. And given the demographics of our community, I don't know how much public transportation will actually be used, but I think getting a bus service into this particular area is really, really important. So I'm glad we were able to find a solution. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
I do like this, and I appreciate the fact that not only can the people from Avondale go to our Target, we can go to their Costco,
Yes.
which is right there. Will we be, when we're taking the information, will we be looking at like what neighborhoods our riders are coming from as well?
Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor. The way they usually do this is when people are boarding, they do a sort of a tick count. But then after time, it's usually the same drivers, and they will share with us where these people are going or who they are, or, they really almost intimately know the people that use the service over time if they use the service continuously. And those are the transit needy folks that we're trying to reach out to. So we might be able to get some very unofficial demographic information, but at a minimum, we'll know where people are getting on, where people are getting off, and then, of course, the feedback on where they would like to go. Actually, when we were out investigating the route and trying to find these alternative bus stops, I found out from the gentleman who is in charge of the contractor that he's already getting requests to go further north on Litchfield Road to Indian School Road because there are folks there that want to get to employment. So when we take a look at everything coming back to you, we may also take a look at what that cost might be just to go a little bit further north, turn around and come back down Litchfield Road, just because there appears to be a need for some transportation to employment.
And that would have been my other question, was we look to expand it, because I know obviously we have a very large retirement community there, And then maybe if we could also get to the area where the mall is and the restaurant are going to be, that would be great someday. It's a future look.
What we're going to be looking at overall is how we can connect existing routes to other routes. If you, for instance, Councilmember Pizzilla's brought up getting folks to the library on Van Buren. Well, we have a bus that stops at Central Avenue on Van Buren. It doesn't go any further. Well, what would that cost be if we just brought it a little bit further? In addition to the library, we're actually hearing from the contractor, folks are asking to go to the DMV office that's right across the street there, which I would never have imagined. But the issue there is, great, we've hit 2 major activity centers, but once you go any further to turn the bus around, you're not getting any revenue. That's all residential. It's a lot of open fields. The Bullard Wash is there. So the 2 options you have are to bring it north on Bullard to connect to the 17 on McDowell, which would give people connections, obviously, to downtown Phoenix, or to take it even further to Estrella Parkway and then try to turn it back around so that it can get back on Van Buren. Now, those are very costly because they involve the bigger bus. Yeah. So we're still trying to take a closer look at what that cost factor is for the big buses versus the circulator buses, and trying to learn a little bit more about what kind of passengers we're getting on Zoom might lead us a little bit closer to a better idea of where that pulse point is for transit in Goodyear. Is it on these big buses that are going to go all the way to downtown Phoenix, or if folks really just want to stay here? Because we sure want to keep them here, but we just want to be fair about where we're spending these dollars. They may not be general fund now, but we don't want to go anywhere near that when we have these resources available to us.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. I tell you, remember when the news came out that Avondale got the Zoom? You know how we felt and how much we wanted it? Look where we are. So thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Good work.
Yeah. Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. We're taking a 10-minute. I've had a request from a council person to take a 10-minute break. So I'll see you back around 8:30, okay? Oh, there we go. Okay, we're on. All right, let's go to 7.5, and that's to consider receiving the FY15 fourth quarter financial report, the FY15 fourth quarter budget transfers, and the FY16 first quarter budget transfers. Hello. Welcome, Lori.
Hey there. Nice to see everybody. We're going to go through a brief summary of the fourth quarter financial report to let you know initially how the year end finished last year for both the general fund and the major operating funds, enterprise funds, and the HERF fund. We're also going to talk about, present to you the fourth quarter budget transfers, which is normally an item normally included in the quarterly report. And today we're also going to present the first quarter of FY16 budget transfers. It's a change in the process that we're moving forward with. That I'll talk about in a little bit more detail later in the presentation. One thing I wanted to call to your attention about this particular report is it's been prepared prior to the financial statements. Prior to the financial statements being finalized and completed. You'll be seeing the FY15 financial statements soon. There will be some differences, primarily due to timing differences. There may have been last-minute changes moving things between years as the financial statements were completed. And the other area where there could be changes is there are these accounting rules that are different than budgeting practice. And an example of that would be in the enterprise funds, because they're operated like a business. For accounting purposes, when you buy something like a large, say, sanitation truck, for a budget basis, we expense that in the year we buy it because we've spent the cash, it's gone. We don't want to take a chance of spending it again. But for the accounting rules say that you need to spread the expense of that particular piece of equipment across the life that you're going to use that piece of equipment. So if it was a $100,000 piece of equipment, in a budget, you'd recognize $100,000 in the year you bought it. In the accounting system, you might recognize it as $20,000 a year for 5 years. In the end, you've recognized the same amount, but those differences may come up when you see that if you try to compare these reports. So to start with the general fund revenue exceeded budget by about $3 million or 4%. And we've talked before that we do have a goal to have revenues come in 4% higher and expenditures come in 4% lower. So that we're right on the area where we would like to end the year. The largest change contributing to that $3 million increase was that local sales taxes were over budget by $2.6 million. Just by way of comparison, so this year we exceeded budget by 7% in local sales tax. For FY14, we exceeded the budget by 5%. The year-over-year growth from FY14 to FY15 in local sales tax, and this is excluding construction sales tax, was about 11%, and in the prior year, the year-over-year growth was about 9%. The restaurants and bars was the largest single growth category in the local sales tax. It grew at over 16% from 14 to 15. Construction sales tax was down from budget. However, if you'll remember when we went through the budget process last year, we reduced our estimate for construction sales tax because we saw that it was not coming in at the way we had anticipated. This is actually, though it's down from budget, it was actually up $460,000 from our estimate. So this is actually, in terms of where we thought we would end the year, we're actually a little bit better in that area. And then development-related revenues were also up about $800,000. So those are the major components that contributed to the increase in revenue in the general fund. In terms of expenditures, again, we have that 4% goal to be 4% under. This year, or in FY14 or 15, we were about 5% under, or $3 million under. Most of that savings that we look for each year comes from personal services, basically salaries and benefits. That happens because we budget for full employment. But during the year, new positions are added. At the beginning of the year, it takes some time to fill them. There's turnover that occurs. It takes a few months to advertise, go through a recruitment process, get somebody to extend their resignation at their prior job so they can come work for us. So that's how those savings occur. And then the other piece that's kind of contributing to this $5 million or this $3 million in savings is not really a savings per se. It is really the carryovers. Essentially, we identify the items in the FY15 budget that we didn't think would be completed, and we move that budget into FY16. So the ending balance goes up so that we can use those resources in the next year for the item that they were planned for in the prior year. Going into the other funds, the HERF fund, revenue was up about $300,000 in that fund. Essentially, they were down. There was one item which was a carryover of $250,000 that accounts for part of that decrease. In the case of the HERF fund, it's ultimately supported by the general fund. There's about $6 million in expenditures in this fund and about $4 million in revenue from the HERF state shared gas tax revenues. So the general fund does make up the difference. So by having a savings in this fund, the general fund will be in better shape at the end of last year. The next major fund is water. Essentially, water is in a break-even position. Revenue was about $200,000 lower than we expected. Expenditures were about $200,000 lower than we expected. So essentially, it ends where we kind of projected it would. Just in the components are a little different than we had anticipated. Wastewater ends the year in a little bit better situation than we expected. Essentially, their expenditures were down almost exclusively due to carryovers, so that will carry into this year and be expended this year. But revenue was up about $300,000, so the wastewater fund will be looking a little bit better when we start this year. The stadium fund is like the HERF fund, is also ultimately supported by the general fund. So revenue was up 30% from budget in the stadium fund, and about $75,000 or 3.5% from the prior year. So you can see here that we've had a couple years of higher revenue. We were hesitating to increase the revenue estimates until we had more of a pattern. So as we go through this year's budget process, we'll look at increasing the revenue estimates in the stadium fund. But some of those revenue increases, a small portion of them, are due to events that come in that weren't planned. And so those events have some costs that are offset by the revenue. So there are some additional costs that came with some of those revenues, but not a material portion of them. And there were increases in both the spring training and the non-spring training areas. Kind of some of the other highlights of the items we include in the quarterly financial report. We always report to you on what's happened with the one-time supplementals. There's a report in here starting on page 26 that kind of goes through in detail each of the one-time supplementals by the funds. Most of those items were implemented last year. There were a few carryovers. There was a large carryover of $250,000 for the pavement conditions survey, which is part of the pavement management funding. So that was carried over into this year and will be completed this year. There was also a project in water that ultimately got wrapped into the planning process that led up to the item you addressed earlier today. And then there was an item also involving a block wall around a wall that there was also funding in FY16, so those funds were carried over to be blended with that to complete the project. In terms of the CIP, it was 22% expended. That looks like a low expenditure rate. Primarily that's due to carryover. It's almost exclusively the difference there is the carryovers. And carryovers in the CIP are much larger than in the operating budget because we have much larger projects that often span multiple years. And so carryovers occur. We can't award a construction contract until we have the whole budget for that construction contract. We can't tell a contractor, hey, we have 500 of the million that we need, so can we contract with you for 500 and we'll come back next year and do the next 500. So we have to wait until we have the whole budget to award a contract. But if we award a contract in March for a project that will take a year, we're not going to spend all of that, say, $1 million. So there's carryovers related to projects that are in progress that may have contracts awarded and the work is moving forward. An example of that might be the police operations facility project that's been going on, or the Goodyear Boulevard project that was going on last year. They continued into this year. In other cases, we just can't get the contract awarded for whatever reason. An example of this is the Adam and Well project in water. That particular item had the funding for the developer share of the project in the budget, but the funding for the city share isn't until the actions you took earlier today. So those will be in this year's budget. And then the last kind of major reason for carryovers is that we have a practice of building up funding for projects in the general fund that basically we're using pay-as-you-go funding. The key example of that in the CIP is the recreation complex that we've been putting aside money each year for. So we have to carry that money over from one year to the next until we get enough to move forward with the project. So that's the kind of high-level summary of the financial report. What I wanted to do now, if there's not questions, is to go into discussion on the budget transfers.
Yes.
Just one quick question.
Yeah.
The estimated general fund balance at the beginning of the year versus the fund balance, the actuals, how close were you overall, ups and downs?
Mayor, Councilman, at the time we pulled this report together, the interfund transfers and the debt transactions had not been completed. So we have not done that analysis yet. I'm sure that'll be available when we bring forward the financial report.
Okay, I'm just curious. At the start, you had a fund balance. At the end, you had a fund. Just
yeah,
how close you got?
$3 million in revenues, $3 million in expenditures. So that's a $6 million. And there will probably be some changes in the interfund transfers. They may net to zero. You know, we have some savings in HERF and the stadium, but there'll be some reductions elsewhere. So
when you had that number, I'd be curious how close we got.
Yep. Okay.
Councilman Stipp?
I'm not sure who's going to answer this particular question, but we talked about revenue projections ending the fourth quarter, ending the year, and we were within the threshold. But there's a component of the revenue projections that relate to the MOUs that we have. If that was in effect right now, would we have had to reopen those MOUs?
I believe the MOU called for the adjustments to begin when the revenue grew by more than 5%.
That's what I remember was 5%. So obviously we were only at 4%, but I see Larry shaking his head no.
Yeah, and it was not based on how this year would finish.
No, I realize it wasn't based on this year, but if it had been, we would have been below that, so we were okay. Now, have we projected or changed our revenue projection philosophy coming forward for future years? As we talked about this when we did the MOUs, that there was concern that if we're under projecting, we're going to end up
just address that.
We're going to end up paying or increasing.
Thank you.
And Larry can back me up on this issue, but Councilman Stepp, Mayor, Lord, no change in philosophy with regard to revenue projections. The 4% was kind of the start of that threshold, and then it built beyond that. So had this been in place today, we'd still be okay. We wouldn't be adding additional monies to, but it does step up once you get beyond 4%.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. And then the second, and this is for later on, do we have a feel for how many projects have not been awarded yet in your CIP?
Mayor, council member, are you referring to last year or this year? Or
if you go back about 3 slides, you said one of the reasons we have such a very low 22% is where we sit with our CIP turnover or carryover. Thank you. That part of it is because we've not yet awarded projects. So you mentioned one as an example. Would it be possible for after the meeting is over to get a list of what those that we have not yet awarded are?
Yes, we can certainly prepare a list of that. We'll use the carryover schedule in the budget document and just identify for you the ones that were not awarded or begun last year.
Yeah, that from last year that we haven't awarded yet. Thanks.
Ready?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, budget transfers. Budget transfers are something that there's reasons come up during the year why we need to do budget transfers. Some of the key reasons are, I'll start with from the bottom up. We have unexpected things. Something happens. Last year we had some storms come along and we had to deal with those and fund and make some repairs and make some improvements as a result of that. Another area is new resources. We may receive grants during the year that are not budgeted, so we do budget transfers to recognize the receipt of those grants so that we can spend them. And then the other area is technical changes or adjustments or mechanical errors. Just to talk a little bit about our budget process and the nature of our, we don't have a budget system in the city of Goodyear right now. Most governments build the budget from the bottom up. Start with the line items, build it up, and then you sum it all up to figure out where you are. We have to approach it in the opposite direction because we don't have a system that rolls up all those details. So we, okay, or this will grow 3%, this will grow 5%, and we come up with a budget, and then we have to go in and divvy it up and put it into the little pieces. And in that process, there are occasions when mathematical or mechanical errors happen. Items get left out as we put those items, as we build that budget together. So you'll hear us all the time. We'll talk about something had been modeled. And when we say that, we mean it was modeled when we did the high-level summary kind of look at the budget, but that we lost the item as we prepared the technical line item budget. And so that's the kinds of things that are happening in that case. And so we'll call those out and bring those to your attention as well. But in the end, the bottom line budget cannot change, but the budget does change by fund at times. So on the highest level, the fourth quarter transfers total about $5.9 million, and most of those are technical corrections, and I'll go through those in more detail in a minute. And in the first quarter transfers, there's about $8 million in adjustments. Most of those are from the carryover analysis, and then the others are technical corrections, and I'll go through those as well. In terms of the fourth quarter, and there are $365,000 in what we call interdepartment or interfund transfers. The key examples in the report are in the public safety, police and fire. They provide support during spring training. We move those costs from the police and fire budget into the stadium budget so that we can accumulate all the cost in the stadium budget. So those is budget transfer, essentially moving those costs, supporting the moving of those costs from the police and fire department to the stadium budget. In essence, there's no funding change there because the stadium is ultimately also, it has a general fund component to it, so we're essentially moving it from the general fund to another part of the budget that's supported by the general fund. There were also some shortfalls in some street impact fees. We talked to you several times last year during the budget process about having to postpone impact fee projects. There were also some older funds that did not have as much funding in it as was anticipated when projects were initially developed. So streets did a lot of work last year and found some ways to, there was some savings they identified in some projects and eliminated a small project here or there to move forward. There's $900,000 in what we call the new revenue category. That's essentially grants and reimbursements and other revenues. The major items are there was about $560,000 in grants that we were requesting that you adjust the budget to accept or to include those. There was about $100,000 in insurance reimbursements for losses that we've had, and we incurred the expense and we got the funding back. And then there was about a $118,000 item where sales tax revenue came in higher, which is wonderful news, but we also have agreements that say we have to repay, development agreements that say we have to repay based on the amount of sales tax we collected. So there was about $118,000 of additional sales tax we had to pay out through development agreements because those revenues were higher. And those revenues are specific to the particular project that was addressed in the development agreement. There was one city manager contingency that was used for an ambulance study included in the fourth quarter budget transfers. And then there were $4.6 million in the technical corrections. The technical corrections, there was $1.2 million that was just simply changing a project number. It didn't change anything about the project. It just changed the technical, ABC 1, 2, 3 to ABC 3, 4, 5 in our accounting system. It didn't change the project or the funding source or any of those types of things. There was another $1.2 million, ironically, 2 transactions of the same amount. That was another case where the budget was entered in the department that we call interfund transfer, and instead of the department that was debt service or vice versa. So it was literally just changing the department in the accounting structure. It didn't, again, change anything about the intent of the expenditure. And there was about $200,000 related to a project that actually got budgeted twice. And so the fund that involved actually had a little bit of savings, and we freed that up. There were $695,000 worth of transfers related to closing out some older funds. We had some funds left from the acquisition of this complex that we were able to use to fund some expenses that were incurred at this complex so that we could close out those funds. There were some older wastewater bonds that we also were able to reply those, cover costs of some other some projects with those funds to close those out. And then there was some police impact fees. We've been trying to get rid of the oldest impact fees first, and so we used the oldest impact fees, closed that fund out, and moved forward to the next most logical fund for that particular item. There is one item in the report for, it's on page 42, and it is essentially, it's the same, this is actually a doubling up of that particular transaction, and it's a case where funding did change. We had a project in the budget that was $381,500 that was included in the general fund when the budget was adopted. It was included in the impact fee fund. It was not an impact fee eligible project. It was intended to be general fund when the CIP was developed. So what we did is we showed both sides of the transaction so it would be clear that we took it out of the impact fee and put it in, offset the other side. And then we added it to the general fund and did the offset. So it's doubled up. It's because we showed both sides of the transaction coming in and out.
Councilman Pizzillo?
Which project was that? Because I recall when we were going through the actual budget process, there was some park projects or whatever that we were trying to find some savings. I don't remember the exact discussion, but I'm just curious what this particular project was. Because we had it in one place and we had it in another, and I thought we were going to combine it. Do you remember that discussion, Larry?
I'll go ahead. Rebecca reminded me this particular one is median landscaping, that it just got put into the impact fee fund and didn't belong there. Okay. So yes, on the discussion, I remember the discussion, but that wasn't with this
wasn't with this one. Okay. All right. So it got in there twice. One of it was transferred back to real, it was budgeted, because they were both budgeted as real money, right?
It was one transaction, but it was budgeted in the impact fee fund. It wasn't eligible for impact fees, so we had to take it out of the impact fee. Okay. So that's one transaction. Okay. Then the second transaction is to put it in the general fund where it was supposed to be.
And that was actually spent?
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. Councilman Osborne?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just, it's funny, and maybe it's just my memory, but I swear of all these years, I don't ever remember this emphasis on technical corrections. And I'm either feeling like, well, it's great that we're showing this and being transparent. At the same time, I'm sitting there questioning, what else did we call it? If this is normal, which it doesn't feel normal. So how else were we showing this in previous years? Because I really don't remember all these technical corrections.
Larry will address that.
Is it me?
No, it isn't. What we did is we've always had these in the budget or in the discussions and in the transfers, but we didn't sort them into these categories. We just gave you the list of the transfers. So the same transaction would have been there with a description. And what we've done in the last couple of years, I'm going to say 18 months or so, what we're trying to do now is to put them in these categories so you can tell the difference between the type of transfer. So it's really trying to make it easier for you and the public to understand the nature behind the transfer. When you get to the new money transfers, for example, that becomes a different issue than some of these technical ones. That's the simple basis for it. The transactions really haven't changed that much. We just haven't summarized them that way.
I see. Okay, because
well, I have to admit, it was a little confusing to me when I first looked at it today, too.
We fully appreciate that it is, and we're really, with all of this, really trying to work hard to keep it transparent, at the same time simple, and those two are not necessarily
simple,
consistent, but we're working on it.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Yeah.
Larry, just a real quick one. I appreciate the categories, and maybe I don't know how you have it sorted here, but it's helpful for me because I can remember some of the numbers, but I don't remember all the numbers. It's been a while. Memory's going, as you know. But anyway.
Did you hear him admit that?
Always admit it.
His microphone broke.
Always admit it. But the one thing that's very helpful is when you're actually moving real money and creating an appropriation. and we've had this discussion earlier, because that tells me that either it was missed, okay, but you have some cash somewhere to cover it, but the appropriation that you're moving it to doesn't have, just gives you spending authority, but doesn't have any money. Those would be nice to have in a grouping, because it's easier then to explain, well, it was accounted, but it was missed on the line item. I remember vehemently when we did the budget, and there was like a couple $1 million that were technical corrections. You had it in the water and the sewer fund, but you had to take it from the contingency because you couldn't go over the budget, and you had to take it from there, which was just an authorization for an appropriation, because that was the only way you could do it. But where was the real money coming from? It was coming from the fund balance that you had extra. Explaining that makes it easier, and I think it will help the others here to understand that, because when you're moving real money to real money and it's difference of accounts, to me, it's not a big deal. But when you're going over or you exceeded something and you got to hit the appropriation for authority, that's something that's a little different that, in my mind, needs a little further explanation. So I don't know if it made any sense to the rest of my council members, but I think if you do that, it'll make it easier for them when you have real money going to an appropriation and explaining where the actual cash came from.
And I think as a general rule, the technical corrections come in that category where the cash is there, it's just where it's putting. The other thing that happens in this, we take a very strict stance in interpreting this, both Lori and I do. And if there is a data input error that happens that puts it in one particular place in our system in HTE when we put the budget in, and it didn't belong there, but it got put in there, the only way we're going to make that change, if it's significant enough, is through this process where you're seeing it. Now, that is, again, very technical as far as the error goes, but we want to be transparent in doing it. And I think it grosses the numbers up a little bit, but it keeps it out in the open.
And see, I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with that. It's just that when it's going from a non-cash to cash, because in reality there, you've got the cash. It just happened to be charged to the wrong account. So you're just doing a debit and credit to move it from one to the other. That's all. To me, I understand it's pretty straightforward. Well, I'm more concerned is when you're just going for that authorization to spend the money, all right, which is your contingency, and you're moving it to something that's actually going to be spent. That, I think, in itself, it would be helpful to explain a little bit more.
And I can assure you that when we are moving, if we have an item that doesn't have the cash appropriation with it, we will find a source for that cash. We will not. I mean, that's the only way we can make it balance.
No, I understand that. Just that explanation that the cash is coming from X, like we did at the beginning of the budget process, where we had that $2 million or whatever it was, and there was no cash for that particular entry, but the cash was coming from the fund balances. So, if that's explained a little further, it would make me happy.
Okay.
Thank you, Larry.
All righty. And then the last item on this page is we had earlier in the year, we asked you to do a budget transfer to move a $250,000 item associated with stadium funding for the capital plan that's joined with the teams. We shouldn't have done that, so we reversed that particular item. That's kind of a recap of the fourth quarter FY15 budget transfers. We don't typically come to you right now with the first quarter transfers for the new year. What we are going to be moving forward with is a way to try to improve the timeliness of your action on budget transfers, so we can minimize situations where perhaps the department needs to move forward and implement something before we can come to you and get the budget transfer approved, to address these technical corrections when we find them more quickly. We will also, we'll continue to work with departments, and if they have a large item coming forward with action for you, if it requires a budget transfer and they can't wait until the next monthly presentation of budget transfers, we'll ask them to get that authorization from you on that particular item. Our goal will be to bring the budget transfers to you at the last meeting of each month. Unfortunately, the first 2 times we're going to do this for you on a monthly basis will be, we won't get to October to you to the beginning of December, and we won't get December to you until the beginning of January due to the holidays. but our goal will be to meet the last regular meeting of the month with the budget transfers for the prior month. We're also going to be, we're working on a project to also improve the timeliness and the relevance and to simplify the quarterly report that we just went through. That quarterly report takes a lot of staff time and energy to produce, which means it then becomes delayed and it's not timely as we deal with other parts of the budget process. So we're going to be working through the Audit Committee to present some ideas for a simplified, streamlined financial report that we would also set a goal of doing monthly as well. So we'll be coming forward with that in the future. So for the first quarter of...
Wait, can I interrupt?
Councilman Stipp.
I know it's not our normal procedure to pop questions in the middle of the presentation, but since you're switching from fourth to third, can I go back to a couple
There's
of
a lot of information, so go ahead.
On page 43, trying to do this with my glasses on. Yeah, page 43.
Yeah. Would you like
I think you referenced this. What was this?
Yeah, this is the case where when we purchased this campus, we used bonds to do that, and we had $117,000 left, and we wanted to close out that fund. So there were improvements made to this campus that were funded last year using, I believe, general funds, that we went ahead and freed up the general funds and used up these bond funds so that we could close out that fund.
Do you know what improvements those were?
It was the improvements for the ERP room, so the computers and not the computers, the work to put in carpeting and on walls and things like that, and the training.
Community room.
The community room, sorry.
Is this over and above what we had budgeted for?
No, this was basically part of the cost. We just took...
So if we budgeted $217,911, $117,911 of that came from unused.
Correct. We just said, hey, we've got these old funds sitting here. Let's close them out. So we basically took $117,000 worth of the costs and moved them to this fund. So we needed to create the budget to cover using those funds for that purpose. Otherwise, we'd have to wait for another future project that would be on this campus that would be eligible to use those funds.
Okay. I guess what I'd like to get from this conversation then is what did we do? Because the money that we used to buy this was one set of money. So if we made improvements that are outside of that, if I can get a list of what those were and the costs associated with them. Because if we paid $10.5 million, then yes, that's what we financed.
That is what we financed. And when the financing was done, a lot of the actual costs that I think were the savings were estimated closing costs and expenses of the sale. The transaction that we're talking about here is very simple. We had budgeted to do those improvements in these facilities out of the general fund. But the monies that we use to finance, when we borrow to build this building, we've got to spend those within 3 years. Mm-hmm. And so we said, okay, let's spend those monies instead of the general fund money to do what we appropriated for. It's that simple of what the transaction was. Is there more that you would like?
We would have lost those monies.
No, I understand that.
We would
I understand
have
that
been
part
able
of it.
to use them for debt service, for
Okay.
example, but we
But
wanted
not
to
for
show them
this.
for the project.
Yeah.
But if we used it for the community room, that was several years later. That was never envisioned as part of the original.
Correct.
So I guess can we find out how much we've spent in total in upgrading the Goodyear Municipal Complex since we bought it? If we bought it for 10.5, but we actually got it for 10.3 because of the savings and all the rest of that, what did we do with the other 200,000? Where did it go?
Okay, but yeah, I think we can, but just to, because that funding was extremely complex in there. We actually, the money that we bought this building, but what we financed, because we had some cash we put in it out of impact fees, so we financed certain improvements. Those costs were estimated at the time. So, I mean, this doesn't really change.
Well, then I guess
any
it's
of that.
what are
What
those
you
certain
wanna-
improvements? Tell me what that is.
From day one, the only issue I'm at all worried about is if I've got an accurate way of tracking each type of project in there. Because over the years since we've done it, for example, when we first bought the building, CTCA was in there. Then we did library improvements. You know, we did the area where the Parks and Rec offices were. That came in. I'm not sure just if our accounting system isn't tracking this building as a project by itself. It's doing it based on the nature. So that's where, I mean, we'll go through and try to see what we can find.
Right. If we budgeted $300,000 to fix or make the PD administration, I want to know that we spent $300,000, we spent $275, or we spent $350.
Okay.
Same thing with the moving fire. How much did we
spend? Are you
spend?
looking from the original purchase in that schedule that we built then?
Well, I think basically maybe we're mixing two different discussions, but because one is the transfer of the leftover monies, if you will, from the purchase price, you know, the use it or lose it, and then the other is what have we actually done here? How much additional money have we invested in this complex, and have we been on budget? We sit here and we say, oh well, we're gonna reallocate this, and we're gonna move PD to over here, and we're gonna put the college here, we're gonna put the library there, and all of these things cost X number of dollars. Well, have we been on budget for that? Have we been under? Have we been over? That's what I'd like to know. Because we've done now a lot of movement in this complex, and we have really just taken it on a whim that we've been on budget. If we've been under or over, and where are those monies coming from? I think over time.
Okay, we'll work.
Am I the only one? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not questioning the direction you are, but that's your right to do that. You know, I'm not sure what it's going to accomplish at this point. Go ahead.
I don't know, you lost me a little bit on that back and forth, but I guess one of the questions I had is was it 150 that was transferred that had leftover funds for the community room? 117, okay, 117, 911. Was that the entire amount for the community room, or did we have some general fund that threw in there as well on top of that?
There were general funds. That was just part of the project. All we were trying to do was to close this account out. Rather than use the general fund, which was in the budget, we wanted to close this project out.
That I got.
Okay, so as it comes to the community room, it would be 117 plus whatever general funds we used. So I don't know if he was getting that, but I'd be curious what it cost us totally for that. Does that make sense?
Brian, go ahead.
What we can come up with.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, just so we're meeting the interests of Council, and in the community room, all in was round numbers around $300,000 for that improvement. Specific to Council Member Stipp's point, I just want to make sure I understand, and it's the interest of Council, is we do have facilities, funds in our facilities area to do relocation of offices and things like that, so that's built into the budget. Question is and we certainly, some of the points were brought up, we have what was done with the library, with also the university that was here. So there's been a lot of activity. We replaced some units, things like that. So I'm just trying to get at the depth of what your interest is in terms of trying to understand what to show as far as where the expenses have gone.
Let's just talk.
I don't understand the direction you're going. I mean, so go ahead.
Let's just talk about the projects that we talked about from here. Building the university, community room, relocation of police and fire, because that was going to be very big chunks, in the library. So let's just talk about those four. Those four came to us with specific dollar amounts that it was going to cost $350,000 for the, or $300,000 for the community room. It was going to cost, $100,000 for the library. It was going to, what did we end up with? So if if staff came to us and said it's going to cost $300,000 for the community room, did we hit $300,000 for the community room? Did it come in at $350,000 or did it come in at $275,000? Let's just start there on the major projects: library, community room, the college, and the relocation of PD and FD administration. Those were the ones that stuck out to me.
So you must have, so you got to help me with this, Bill. So internally, you're internalizing that the numbers are not correct, or the numbers aren't complete, or the money was spent in areas it shouldn't have been spent. I don't know where
Do
you're
we
going.
have any idea how much was spent? We know what we budgeted, but do we know what we actually spent? That's where I'm driving at. I know how much was budgeted for the community room, but I have no idea how much we actually spent. Did we spend $300,000? Did we spend more? Did we spend less? I don't know. So now we've got money that we're just taking these transfers back and forth, and we have no idea how much of that was left over. How much, if we transfer something in to cover a budget overrun, we don't even know that there's a budget overrun. We have no idea.
Mayor and Council, these 4 project areas, we can certainly bring back information. We came in, I think it was, I'm not sure, it was a few thousand under budget that we had reported to Council for the, I still call it ERP, but the community room. But some of these other projects, we can certainly look at what was budgeted and what we came in at. I would say the relocation of fire and police, that one is more of a facilities, and that one will be a little more problematic. We'll at least see what we can get there. Certainly for the college, the library, and the community room, those are much easier.
Okay, and which then bleeds into my second question. We use this term CIP contingency fund quite a bit, transferring in and out of it. And so, and if you've got the answer at your fingertips, great. How much is there? How much is in the CIP contingency fund?
Mayor, council member, as we go through the budget adoption process, we identify for you I think that we either call it the CIP contingency or we call it an appropriation for potential improvement district. And that is because state law requires that we have appropriation to spend, we adopt that appropriation. It has no funding associated with it. We adopt that appropriation so that we do have the ability, when a developer comes in and provides us $1 million to put in a traffic signal, we use that for creating the appropriation to use these resources, such as new resources, or if we have to tap fund balance, such as the Councilman Pizzillo mentioned when we did the budget adoption last year at tentative. We did not have the vehicles in for the enterprise funds. So when we got to final, we reduced that CIP contingency and used water and wastewater and sanitation fund balance as the source to be able to use that appropriation. So that's a basic explanation.
But we also used it to transfer money for covering salaries for this first quarter.
We used it, correct. We have done that. I think Larry mentioned earlier. We don't use it unless we can identify a source. So that was a technical error in the budget where the cost of the MOU were included when we did the high-level budget planning, but when we put in the detailed line items, they were left out of the budget. So they were fundable either by an ending balance that existed when we adopted the budget, or by knowing that the general fund ending fund balance was up, so we had more resources available than we had planned. And so that was how we identified. When Larry described, we don't use that unless we have a resource to support it.
I guess the title just throwing me off because it's not a capital improvement project, and then we're taking salary money out of it.
I apologize. It's a name that was adopted before I came. I assumed you were familiar with that. I will be happy to go through the process and change the name of that, and it may help with what Councilmember Pizzillo has asked us to do in terms of identifying what is using some real resource versus what's just moving things around.
Thanks.
As long,
Pizzillo?
I assume as long as somebody's tracking when you're hitting that cash or that fund, what that balance is, so we don't end up running it in the red. That's all I care about, because somebody's got to be tracking it to make sure that, yeah, here's our cash. We took it out of this fund. That's how much less. We can't spend it more than once. So,
Am I being too naive to assume that's been happening? These questions that they're bringing up tonight, Bill and Joe, are these normal practices that we're doing? Is this something odd we're doing? Is he looking for something that we're going to discover that we're not doing right? I'm getting really kind of negative vibes on the end of my dais here. So where are we?
Okay. I think very simply, is this a little abnormal? Do all cities go through this level of detail? No, and for a couple of reasons. And actually, over the last few years, we've increased your involvement in this. Before it was happening
dangerous sometimes, I can
behind
tell
the
that.
curtain, so to speak, and we wanted it out where everyone could see. As Lori talked about, our enterprise system, HTE, we do not use that as a budget development system. If we used it as a budget development system, many of these things we're talking about wouldn't be coming up. But we can't use it. It doesn't facilitate the various needs that we have. And so our system is, I call it manual. No, it's not on paper, but it is volumes of spreadsheets linked together. So as we go through this process, we give you a balanced budget when we adopt the budget. And in it, for example, in the case of the salary expenses, it had those expenses included in those numbers. But when the details get put into the system, which is happening after the fact, it doesn't always get into the system that way. I suppose one approach could be we could ignore those when we have to make an entry in our system to correct it. We could do that, and I think in the past that may have happened. We can do that and not bring it to you because it is technical in nature, but we feel a whole lot better just bringing it to you. Apologize for the complexity of it. One of our charges over the next year is to try to simplify this process moving forward. And we're working hard at it to do that. But it really is just, if you will, it's accountants being accountants, budget people being budget people, and we're just trying to make sure that everything is out there and in front of you.
Sometimes too much information is dangerous.
I wouldn't disagree.
And I'm seeing a confusion on this dais and the tone.
I'm not confused.
I would like us to somehow come to terms with this. Either Councilman Stipp meets with you, because I think this continued conversation is not getting us anywhere tonight. And I would prefer that you sit down with him and explain that part to him, and then decide how you want to present it to the council, because we're ticking on the time, and I think we're getting into the weeds of your job. And there's a trust factor here that we've lost a little bit on this council. So that's what I would like to charge to city manager to get done with this. Okay, because we could go on all night and talk about this. We need to wrap it up. Okay. Thank you.
All righty, starting here on the yellow pages, this is the budget that you can hold me accountable for the technical errors. Essentially, we have $8 million in budget transfers in the first quarter of this year. $300,000 of that is for grants that we received and for use of fund balance, such as we've been discussing. The use of fund balance is we had a HERF truck vehicle that didn't get purchased last year as planned. It didn't get spent. The fund balance is increased because that vehicle wasn't purchased, so we have to add the budget in this year to go ahead and finish that purchase. There's also $40,000 in there where the stadium is returning a $40,000 supplemental to the general fund because they worked with the teams and were able to fund that particular supplemental via the capital fund that the teams help us to manage, and they have decide what can and cannot be, that fund can and cannot be used for. There are $7.6 million in what we're calling technical corrections. $5 million of that is the carryover reconciliation for both the CIP and the operating budget. So the vast majority of this is cases where we did our best job estimating in March how much we might spend last year on something like the Goodyear Boulevard project. We're conservative so that we're sure that we have enough budget in the new year, so we estimate high. And then what we do is once the year's over, we go back and we say, if Project A carried over $2 million, if it overspent last year by $500,000, we reduce its budget by $500,000 in the current year to maintain the original project budget. So it's just an exercise of comparing what was budgeted to what was spent and correcting the budgets to what they should have been so that the entire project's budget remains the same over the 2 years. There is $1.1 million in transactions that are essentially three items that we budget one way and actually conduct the transaction in another way. One of them is that stadium capital that we were talking about, where we have that $250,000. We budget it as an expense in the Parks Department or in the Stadium Department, but we conduct it as an interfund transfer, so we move that budget over to the the CapEx fund is what we call it. So it's just moving that appropriation to where it will actually occur. Then there are two pieces of the debt service program where they are an enterprise funded, it's the stadium debt service that is partially supported by secondary property tax. Because the stadium is an enterprise, we need to reflect all of its expenditures in the enterprise fund. So we budget the expenditure for that debt service in the secondary property tax fund, but when we actually implement the transaction, we transfer those secondary property tax funds over to the enterprise fund, and they make all of the debt service payments there. So it's not changing the nature of what the funds were intended for, it's just getting them in the fund where they belong when we actually do the transaction. Then there are adjustments of about $657,000 that are, for the most part, reducing the enterprise fund. The same number we came to you with last year when we were doing those changes, when we went from tentative to final. We fine-tuned those numbers for the enterprise vehicles, and we're able to reduce some of those numbers. So we're reducing the water, wastewater, and sanitation budgets down to what they really need to do their fleet vehicle replacements in the current year. And there were some wastewater salaries that were missed, some salary adjustments that were missed as we moved we moved budget from a set of personnel spreadsheets to a set of department budget spreadsheets. And so that is an increase there, and it's almost exclusively offset in wastewater by the reduction in the vehicle. And the balance I believe, was less than $50,000. It's covered by their fund balance. This page also has items that are, Councilman Pizzillo's pointed out, using real resources. There was a $400,000 item in the Parks budget for work they do in the Community Facilities District that they're reimbursed for. The expenditure was left out of the budget, so we're putting that in. It's reimbursed by the Community Facilities District Fund. And then there's the $315,000 in public safety, overtime, and specialty pay corrections that were calculated and included in our analysis of the MOUs, and were just left out of the budget. So that's kind of a high-level summary of the budget transfers for the FY15 fourth quarter and FY16 first quarter. I'd answer any further questions and ask that you approve those.
Okay, we're going to take this in two steps. So let's go to number one. Could I have a motion, a second, to receive the fiscal year 2014-15 FY15 fourth quarter financial report and approve the FY15 fourth quarter budget transfers? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I heard a motion from Councilman Campbell and a second from Councilman Osborne. Open for council discussion. Councilman Pizzillo.
Just a quick one on that CFD, because when you budget for the CFD, there's stuff enough in the reserves because you have your property taxes that bring your revenue in. There was enough to pay back the parks?
Yeah, the Community Facilities District has adequate. They have the funds budgeted to reimburse for the services by the parks.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All right, let's vote on it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, go on to the second one. Could I have a motion and a second to receive and approve the fiscal year 2015-16 FY16 first quarter budget transfer? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Heard a motion for Councilman Osborne, a second from Vice Mayor Loretano. Open for council discussion? No discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Let's go down to 7.6. It's the last item on the business to consider the 2015-16 pavement management projects. And Ron Seabright, Streets and Traffic Superintendent, will present.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of council. I'm here to present our 2015-16 pavement management projects. What we're asking for is approval of the budgeted expenditure not to exceed $2,719,283, and that's to complete all our pavement management projects for this year. This is kind of just an overall map. I know it's hard to see, but it just kind of gives you an illustration of where everything falls within the city. First map we get into kind of breaks it down a little bit. In the green is what we're going to do is high density mineral bond. That's the same product that we used last year up in EMR and around Cedarville Village. The purple areas within that green areas you see will be slurry seals. Those were roads within that subdivision that have deteriorated past the point that we could put that kind of preservation on. So we're going to get those done at the same time by the same contractor. And Holbrook was awarded that contract. It's the same contractor that worked in those areas. In the red, you'll see that's a low volume Cape seal. That's the Rio Paseo area. That's just one neighborhood which is deteriorated past a slurry seal. So we're doing a multi-layer system in there. The other areas that will get high-density mineral bond are Palm Valley Phase 2 in this section. Also, we'll be doing a microseal on McDowell from 303 to Cedarville. That's a rubberized microseal, so that will help a little bit with deterioration there. That is actually being funded by our ADOT agreement when they built 303 in I-10. So McDowell from 303 to Cedarville. That cost of $72,000 is actually coming out of what we got from them per our agreement. As far as the microseals, we're going to be doing we're going to continue the microseal down Estrella Parkway. It's going to go all the way from McDowell down past MC-85 up to the Gila River Bridge. Along that path, we're going to catch Roosevelt, which runs along Walmart, and then we're going to catch Portland, which comes out by Cedarville, and we'll hit 157th Avenue down to Van Buren. On the next slide, it kind of carries on there. The other areas that we're going to do high-density mineral bonds, Canyon Trails, Pueblo Verde out there. It shows where the microseal carries down. And down along Centera, we're going to hit Centera Boulevard and Harrison. And then as we get to Yuma, we're going to catch that section of Yuma just east of Estrella Parkway, and we're also going to catch that small section of Van Buren that is just west of Estrella Parkway there. The yellow section you see there is where we're going to actually do double fast. That's a section along right on Citrus and McDowell. It's a short section of a problem area that we have that gets a lot of water. So we're trying to seal it up so we prevent, mitigate potholes and things of that nature. The other section that we're going to do.
Can you repeat that, where that is in McDowell? Where was that again?
Right on Citrus in that intersection. We'll be going 150 feet north of the intersection. We'll be going east, and then we'll be going south of that intersection right there.
Citrus and what?
Can you point to
McDowell. I was out there. They were doing some.
Tell us where it is.
Work out there this week.
Just got a pointer on it. Oops, I think I just shut it off. There we go. That section is actually
Mouse.
Let me see here. Right here.
Right there, okay.
I don't think that's it.
No, that's not it. Hang on a section. It's on the other one. Did we cover it up? Let's see.
Is it the little pink at the end there?
Yeah, right here.
Pat McDowell. Pink.
So it's a little pink section, and I'll get a double fast on that road. The other section that I was actually pointing to is that we're doing, which will get a multi-layer system, which is a Cape seal, which is right here, the yellow, and that's move up there a little bit. There we go. Right here. That takes Yuma Road, just west of Cotton, all the way to 173rd Avenue. And then we have a section of 173rd Avenue, which enters into Cotton Flower, which is deteriorated, which we're also doing a Cape seal on. And then down here in a lower section, we're doing a Cape seal. And this is part of that industrial park, which is south of MC 85. That's La Cometa. And that runs from MC 85 down to El Sol. High-density mineral bonds are typically put on roads that are in this condition. It's got minor deterioration, minor cracking, and that's the product that we used up in EMR. So they'll come in and they'll seal those cracks and then apply the product right on top of that.
Yes, Councilman Ortano.
I know that we were supposed to have a warranty for like a year, and since they're back out, are they going to check the areas? Because I've noticed some of those cracks have reopened, or is that normal, or?
Our warranty is actually 5 years.
Okay.
So we do a re-inspection at the 1 year point every year, and we'll look at it. And if the product's not performing to our satisfaction, up to 5 years at a certain percentage, if that product's wearing off, they'll come back and reapply it, and they'll also re-crack seal.
Okay, so they don't have to come out while they're doing the other, we don't run out of time.
Correct.
Okay, good.
All our projects, we provide notices to our residents. It's with the high-density mineral bond, we do a 24-hour street closure. It helps the product set up quicker. We also provide, help to assistance to the residents getting back and forth to their vehicles and carrying anything that they need to do. And there's also a phone number that they can contact. This is kind of a typical map of what that closure looks like. It gives them a detailed outline of where to park, where not to park, and what streets will be doing on what days. Slurry seal, that product is usually applied to roads in this type of condition. As you can see, it's got a little more deterioration. They come in and crack seal it prior to the application, and then they come in and apply the slurry seal on top of that. And those were the roads that you saw that were in pink within that one subdivision there. Microsurfacing, the deterioration is just a little worse. They come in and they crack seal it, and a micro seal is actually kind of just a more robust slurry seal. It's got larger aggregate. It's got additives in it to help it cure quicker. It's what we applied on Pebble Creek between just north of McDowell there. Fractured aggregate, this is the intersection of Citrus and McDowell. As you can see, it's got a lot of alligator cracking. It's in pretty bad shape. This is almost to the point of reconstruction, but in order to seal it, because we have a lot of water on it and we want to make sure that it's treated and it holds up and we don't have all these potholes in the road that people can hit, we're going to put a double application of FAST on this intersection to seal it.
You're going to do it fast?
Yes, we will. Fractured aggregate surface treatment, what they do is they come in and they apply a thick coat of asphalt rubber emulsion, and then they come behind it with a fine aggregate, which is treated. It's actually coated with asphalt, and then it's rolled in, and then after that it's swept. Low volume Cape seal, this is at Rio Paseo area. As you can see, it's deteriorated past, just a little bit past what we'd actually put a slurry seal on. So what we're going to do is a fine aggregate fast. That's going to be our base course. And then we're going to come on top of it with a slurry seal. So the final product will actually be a slurry seal, but the fractured aggregate, it will get it the support that slurry seal needs. This is an area at La Cometa, and as you can see how far this is deteriorated. So this is going to be a multi-layer system also. We'll come in here and we'll put a double layer fast on it. But we'll do a high volume fast, which has the larger aggregate. What that'll do is that'll fill all those voids in there. And then once we fill the voids, we'll come on top of it with a micro seal.
How old is that road? Is that an old road?
Right about 18 years.
Oh, it's an old road. Thank you.
And with that, I'll open up to any questions or discussions.
Thank you very much. Are there any
You're
speaker
welcome.
cards?
No, Mayor.
Would anybody like to speak?
No. What would you like to hear?
Okay, could I please have a motion and a second to approve the budgeted expenditure of $2,719,283 to complete the pavement management projects in various locations throughout the city. Do I hear a motion?
So move.
Second.
I heard a motion by Councilman Campbell and a second by Councilman Osborne. Open for council discussion. Councilman Stipp.
By approving this budget expenditure tonight, does this then alleviate the need for you to come back for the over $500,000 contract award? Are you going to award any one single contract for more than $500,000 under this 2.7?
Mayor Lord, Councilman Stipp, yes, we will.
Okay, so will you come back, or does this absolve that?
No, this is to approve all those contracts.
So he's getting back, I'm assuming, Bill, to the point he's been trying to make this evening. So that's why I said, Larry, if we have to have a procedure here and what we're going to do. And are we changing procedures so that we're down to the nickel and dime of everything? Or are we going to put it in your hands in the accounting department to take care of it, to bring it back to us and present it in a comprehensive way that this kind of questioning won't, I mean, everybody should question the budget. I'm not saying that, so don't any of you, but.
Mayor,
Do you get my point?
we have a standing policy that says every expenditure over $500,000 comes before the council, period.
Honorable Mayor, Councilman Stipp, we did provide a breakdown for you as far as each contract and each funding that we're spending. So if in the staff report.
Page 3 of your staff report.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect.
So for the microsurfacing, the contract was awarded for $971,134. High-density mineral bond was awarded at $973,451. Slurry seal was $118,364. Low-volume Cape seal was $330,294. High-volume Cape seal was $277,750. And the fractured aggregate surface treatment was $48,290. We just wanted to propose and bring all these projects forth in order to get them scheduled. Once we get our approval, and even though we have awarded contracts, we still have to come back to the contractor. And because there's only a few contractors that do this type of work, we have to compete with Mesa, Phoenix, and all that. So that's why we tried to bid them all at the same time, and then we can start scheduling them. Our hopes is to get, a lot of the projects done in the fall and then schedule the rest in the spring. But it's, we to be honest with you, we don't know which ones. It's whoever's available.
Sure. No, I totally get that. I'm really talking about procedures. So apparently I am the only one who doesn't get this $500,000 thing.
No, actually, tonight's agenda item is to get that approval from you. That's the purpose of this agenda item, is those $500,000 items, which is why the COAC shows those amounts as Ron listed out, right, and who the vendors are.
But have we already awarded those contracts?
Those awards are subject to the City Council approving expending the funds, which is the action that is being asked of you tonight. Okay. If you don't do that, then the contract has not been awarded.
Have we always done it in this order? Because if memory serves me correctly, we've never awarded the contract. It's always come before us to approve, the city manager to award the contract to XYZ company for.
Authorizing the city manager to sign the contract,
Right.
execute the contract is what the action has been. But before it comes to you, the actual procurement process
Totally got that.
includes the award of it. They're the successful bidder, but it is subject to your authorizing the city manager to sign it in effect. So really, this isn't a change. What's different here is you're seeing the whole program that Ron has showed you. It could have brought each contract as a separate agenda item. That's really the only one that's different here than what you're used to when it's just one item that we're doing.
Because what it says is approval of this expenditure allows the city to enter into contracts for microsurfacing, et cetera. It doesn't say authorizing the city manager. It says we're going to just go ahead and blankly do it. Typically, we've seen this as allow the city, or give the city manager authorization to enter into a contract with Bill's construction company for $937,000, for Joe's construction for $500,000. Have I missed that?
Yes, Roy.
Members of the council, usually what you see, what you do under the financial policies, you approve the expenditure over $500,000. Now, usually when you see that individual item, it's one item and the contract is there. The contract's not signed until council approves the expenditure, but you're not approving the contract per se under the policy.
So under the $500,000, we're not actually approving the contract.
You're approving the expenditure.
Just approving the expenditure.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity.
Okay. Yes, Councilman Osborne.
And this is either for you or for Luke. We have a citizen that has been very concerned over Saraville and areas, and I want to make sure, are we covering his concerns here or are we not? And if we are, I want to make sure that someone in staff is going to be responding. And I'm sure, Luke, you know who I'm speaking of.
I'll let you handle that. I'm not sure.
Is it the guy that's in the county island?
Mayor Lori, Councilor Osborne, the particular concerns you've mentioned, I know that the primary intersection of concern is McDowell and Citrus. For those concerns, that was the one where Ron had mentioned we're doing the double layer fast.
Okay.
So some of the really poor alligatoring is at the intersection with all the stopping and starting. And then, as we've talked about before, we've got the other roughly $1 million in ADOT detour money that we're going to expend on those other roads in the near future, kind of as we get through the ADOT phase 2 of the interchange. But that one intersection isn't very much in need.
Yes.
It has been a resident concern for sure.
Okay. Well, that resident, was told this evening that we would be taking action, and I'm just making sure that clarifying, are we taking action on the things he was concerned about? And so I appreciate it. I just didn't know the intersections.
I totally support her on that statement.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Yes, Councilman Campbell.
I have a question. It has nothing to do with this, but I'd like Mr. Dalkey to ask you to get back to Mr. Dalkey to get to me. I'd like to know when we did something on Litchfield Road between Western and Yuma to MC 85 and Main Street. There's a big cut in the middle of the street where it looks like we've run a sewer line or a water line, and we've got patches and holes, and it's not been covered properly. And I don't need to know tonight, but if you can tell me sometime, please, I'd appreciate it.
Mayor Lord, Councilman Campbell, that is scheduled for a micro seal, and it should be in 16-17.
Okay.
From Yuma, just north of Yuma, south to MC 85.
Yeah, it goes all the way to the railroad track. I noticed it again today, and it just seems, as you drive over it, it rumbles. So it's opening up.
Correct. We did appropriate some funding from the developer for a micro seal portion of it.
But not till 17?
Well, the plan is for us to do it 17. We've already expended our budget allotment for this year.
Okay.
So we plan on moving that to next year along with several other roads that we have planned for next year.
We would like to have that whole area filled with businesses eventually. where Lockheed Martin is, and it's running right beside them and right beside Crooks and Door.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let's get it for vote. Oh,
Just real
Councilman
quick.
Pizzillo, sorry.
On the streets, I assume you survey those regularly to determine which one. Is there certain width, I guess, in those cracks before they get sealed? I know we've got a lot of streets throughout the city, but do you have something that takes you out quite a ways on the streets that you've identified? And I don't want to take your time up here now. Maybe I'll hook up with you other time on how they get lined up and at what point are those streets at a point where you have to put the sealer and
The depth of that crack.
Yeah.
Yes, we survey the streets every year when we're planning these operations. We also have a full data collection coming up this year, which we're currently working with procurement and IT to finalize the scope. That company will come out and survey all our roads one more time with their van, and then we'll finalize our next year's projects after that's done.
If we get a complaint from a citizen on a particular street or on a particular roadway, what would you suggest we do?
Is any complaint for a street, you can contact me or
I don't want to contact you directly. I just give
or
our
go
staff,
through.
Brian, so to find out where they may be in line or whatever.
You mean what stage they're at?
Yeah, what stage they're at or that type of stuff.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, and the other thing is if a citizen has a concern, Ron, do they go direct? What is the process for a citizen? I mean, one is council, what is the time frame for certain surfacings and things like that? The other is if there's a citizen complaint, how is that typically handled?
If it's specific problem, like if there's large cracks in his road or something like that, we'd like to address those right away. If it comes to a surface treatment, they can bring it to us as well. They can bring it to the engineering department, or they can actually do it through public stuff. And that's actually answered in writing.
So probably the mechanical would probably just either send it to Lauren or Rob or somebody.
Yes.
If it comes directly to us, and then they'll get a hold of you and kind of work it from there. Okay. Thank you.
Just one last comment. We would hope the hub entrepreneurship would come up with better seals and better ways to do roads. If you look at all the time and you look at how quickly it disappears, they come out and they do all this work, we pay all this cost, and the next thing there's crack there. So you might put that out on that Saturday class. They could just think of the money they could make if they came up with something like that. Okay, let's vote on this. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. All right, council, comments, accommodation reports, current events. Councilman Osborne, you have anything? Councilman Campbell?
No, but you can talk about today if you'd like, real quick.
Well, why don't you talk about it for me?
Okay, I will. I was going to give the mayor. The mayor and I went to the ribbon cutting ceremony at Avila today, and the units are gorgeous, and they are just, they're spectacular, and I would encourage all of you to take the time to go through the model homes. It is extremely well done. It's easy to get in, it's easy to park, and it's easy to get out. And they're going to be a wonderful neighbor for that entire neighborhood, and we're very happy that they're here in Goodyear.
Anybody on this side? Well, I would like to thank staff for the state of the city. It was great. I really appreciate all the support I received for that. Thank you for council that were attending. Thank you for ladies wearing red. I thought it was a real special night. Yeah. The other thing I mentioned, the Homeless Youth Connection, it was extremely successful. They made lots of money for the great cause, and I was real pleased to see that. So let me see. CTCA Safety Day celebration, very well done. Thank you very much. Made us proud. Let me see what I hit here. Oh, Desert Springs. Your church had an absolutely magnificent art gallery that evening that I attended, and we have some very, very good professional artists in Goodyear, and I attended the one up at Australia, too, at the private home, and we have artists in our city that are selling their artifacts for $400,000, $5,000. These are really, truly artists. They're accomplished, so we have a lot to be proud of. And then Make a Difference Day, I thought it was very well. How about you speaking on Make a Difference Day, Joe? Thank you.
I don't know. There seem to be several hundred people there. got the nice send-off to them. Appreciate them all showing up. Again, I always like to do the farewell as far as that's what makes this a great community. A lot of people giving of their time, coming to help others. Yeah. Fantastic turnout. So, again, a tip of the hat to our residents because they're what makes it great.
And Sherry, would you talk about the Fall Festival, please?
I don't know how many people we had there. Nathan can probably tell us.
9,274.
How many?
9,274, which is 40% more than last year.
That's wonderful.
And it was great, and it was fun. And Wally, Joe, and I, and my daughter Victoria did the costume contest. And there's a lot of really creative people out there, much more creative than we are. Right. So it was great. And thank you very much for the staff for putting on a wonderful event.
And thank you to council to attending all those events. I couldn't that day or in that evening, but I went to the German Oktoberfest. As far as sehr schön, yeah. And we say in German, viel Spaß. Okay, city manager, it's up to you.
Very, very quickly, it's been a long night. A couple of things. One is you will get in the manager's weekly report more detail on Make a Difference Day. Also on the annual festival, Fall Festival held last Saturday. And then we are having the police operations groundbreaking a week from Wednesday, November 4th. You'll get the details for that. And then the other is there is a request for council as far as weighing in on the proposed new schedule for the council retreat. So we're asking that council provides that to us by the end of this week. Do the proposed dates and timeframes work with the council retreat, which would actually start November 16th as we get into the CIP, and then we had a couple of times proposed for January. So most importantly, does it work with each council member's schedule? And if so, then we'll go forward with that. And lastly, we had follow-up items on some capital-related projects here for the Goodyear Municipal Complex. We'll be providing that information to council. And then it was also suggested that we had an opportunity to meet individually with a council member to go through some more details. So that's it for follow-up tonight.
And council, do you have any inquiries of staff? I know you made it on the street. Anybody else? Okay. Well, with that, the next meeting will be a work session on November 2nd. And
November 2nd?
I have November 2nd.
Oh, I will not be here, Mayor.
Well, that's all right.
I will be in Nashville at NLC. I'm gone that whole week. I leave the day after the council meeting.
Do a good job. We'll see when you get back. Okay. And then on the 2nd of November, 5 o'clock work session, the 9th work session, and the 9th regular council meeting. So with that, everybody can go home. Adjourned.
All right. So we got